What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Jeranism. Well, tonight we are the GLOBEBUSTERS ISS live viewing party, and as you may have noticed, I'm sure you did notice, that the GLOBEBUSTERS channel has been removed. We are hoping it is temporary. Basically, we tried to get on there today, and it was just gone. All the videos gone, and we got a email that said several severe policy violations, which caught us by surprise because we have never received any kind of strike or community, problem or issue. So I've been emailing with YouTube today, and we'll see what ends up happening. I'm going to kind of at this point look at it as a shill attack, but we'll see what happens, and maybe we'll be back on GLOBEBUSTERS next week, or if not, we'll be right here on Jeranism. So with me, as always, is first Bob. Bob, what's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot. It was a great day in Denver today. The weather was actually nice, and we didn't have any chemtrails, so I'm always thankful when that happens.
It was almost a perfect day if it wasn't for the pulling of the GLOBEBUSTERS channel.
Exactly.
And also with this is John, the John, what's
Hey,
going on?
oh, yeah, sounds like a shill attack to me for sure. And like I was telling you before, YouTube's usually pretty good about stuff like that, but what people do is they abuse the automated systems that YouTube has in order to trigger certain, violations. And once you've gone back and forth with the right person on YouTube, I'm sure they'll do the correct thing and put it back up. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
All right, you've taken the stress off me. I'm not worried anymore. So,
Well, don't. I'm not going to swear to it though.
yeah, I wouldn't do that. Don't trust men, whatever you do. And we also have with us tonight, we've got a packed house. We've got all three of the winners of last week's contest, and so everybody knows, we will be doing the same thing again. Give me about 15 minutes after the show, and on jeranism.com on the homepage, at the bottom, you'll see an entry form. You just fill out your email address and name, and then on the Sunday before next week, it will draw the winners for me, and I'll announce those next Monday on the GLOBEBUSTERS show. So this week joining us are all three winners. First, we have Michael from Fairbanks, Alaska. Michael, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Very good. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and where you're from, and what your current stance is on the globe, or flat, or concave, or inverted.
Okay. Well, I'm a freshman at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I stand with flat and everything that you guys have been talking about, and along with some other conspiracy channels, if you will. I kind of like to think that it's all a conglomeration into the big lie that it's a globe.
Certainly seems that way. Um, I, I will just ask you real quick. You said you go to college, so are you kind of keeping that to yourself, or is there other people talking about it?
I seem to be the only one talking about it around my university, but I'm trying to get more people to look into it, and that's slowly progressing.
Well, good. I just think that's the most important thing. If it's a ball, prove it, and then let's move on and go to the next thing. But it doesn't seem like anybody wants to prove it. They just want to call us names. So, also joining us from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Curtis. Curtis, what's going on?
Hey, how are you today?
Doing good. Same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you stand currently.
Well, I'm 47 years old. I'm from Philadelphia, PA, and I've been looking into conspiracy theory, if we can use that word in a positive light, since the 90s. I'm a private investigator by trade, a former police officer, and I'm sort of similar to you. I believe you said you had a loss prevention and security management background.
Yeah,
Um,
correct. I was with CVS in the loss prevention program when I left. So,
right, right. I'm a security management consultant as well, and I noticed back in the 90s there was a major trend in how law enforcement was being transformed right before my eyes. I was a cop before 911, you know, and there was a major shift in law enforcement to basically federalize local police departments. So anyway, I dove into Oklahoma City. Uh, the day 911 happened, I called it a hoax. I've been on the cutting edge of this stuff for a very long time. I'm presently, my handle online is the Vegan Warrior. I've actually been able to link a lot of the conspiracies not only to false media reports, but also the food we eat. And I guess that can come out in the discussion maybe later.
Good. Yeah. So far, it's got a ton of questions for both of you, so it should be a
Yeah.
good show. And last, we have Pete from New Jersey. Pete, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, Jaren?
Very good. Tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell everyone, and give us your current stance on where you live.
All right, well, I'm Pete from Morristown, New Jersey. I started into like the flat Earth research a few months ago. It was like sometime around the summer when I first started discovering Eric Dubay and all the other flat earthers. I stumbled across you a little later into my journey in this conspiracy, or the revealing of the truth, and it's been a really interesting ride, an interesting uh, like journey discovering all the truth. I really all first started out with conspiracies, really with uh, like what they put in our food, stuff like that, with Monsanto and stuff like that, and that moved into like 9/11 and Apollo, and that's how I got here.
Yeah, we all seem to have pretty similar stories as far as that goes. I know for me, it was definitely a NASA and Apollo start. So I kind of feel like we're all in the same boat. So glad you guys are here. And we got Bob and Morgile with us if you guys have any questions for them. And we are, again, waiting for the live feed to wake up. So Bob, you have any questions for any of the three guys to start?
No, not really yet. I think I probably have some questions for all of them here in a little bit, but I'm sitting here writing down my notes and just trying to get things ready. Is somebody messing with the microphone? I think that might be Pyro Pete, possibly. Having some microphone issues there? Or?
Yeah, sorry about that. This is like a built-in mic here.
No problem.
Okay.
If you head up to the top, that little you should be able to mute yourself when you're not
Yeah,
talking.
I got it.
Might sound better for all of us if we do that, but so I guess I have a question for Curtis to start. And Curtis, how long were you a police officer? And maybe you could just mention some of the things that you saw that caught you off guard, or at least allowed you to see that maybe you should get out of that particular job.
Right. Yeah, I came out of college in '92. My first job was a police officer, and I worked the streets right around the time of the Rodney King beating. Um, so I was in the police academy when all that stuff was going down, and it was that's my introduction to law enforcement. I got sick of it probably right around the 3-year mark, and I went into the military because I was already in the reserves. And I was military police, and I was also CID while I was in the Army. And the attitude was even transitioned into the military, as far as becoming a police state somewhat. I'm very I don't want to say I'm a big supporter of us living up to what we say we are as far as the Constitution is concerned. So I started seeing a lot of injustice and things like that. So anyway, I got out of the military in '99, and I got into my first job. I was a corporate security manager for Merck Pharmaceuticals. So I started doing that, started my own business around after 911, started doing security consulting, and um, became a private investigator. Well, I was actually a private investigator in the 90s as well. Uh, did private investigator work, been looking into conspiracies, picking apart pretty much every single so-called national tragedy from Sandy Hook to the Boston bombing to all of it. I've really dove in on all of those. It's sort of my hobby. And what I do is I actually apply the fundamentals that they teach us to discover criminal acts, and I apply it to some of these news stories with as much as the information that they can provide us. And I've always come back with false flags. Um,
Yeah, I think it's a great way to go about things is that kind of investigative background. If you heard the show last night on Raw on Truth Frequency Radio, it's something that we talked about that just a little algorithm kind of thing that we go through that I think is kind of just really looking at things from every angle, and I think it's something that is missing from the scientific world, and I don't have a problem with science. I honestly don't, but the problem with it is the people behind science are the ones who make the decisions, right? Our tests don't tell us any proofs. The tests don't give us the answers. It's the people who interpret the tests who then decide what the tests tell us. Well, when you have people who their whole life is science and their whole life is built on the background and the faulty foundation of the ball Earth and of the sphere and of the endless galaxy and everything else, well then of course when they get their results, we know right away they're never going to put them anywhere in any kind of a God category or anywhere in a supernatural kind of category. So they're always going to be shoved, or it's like fitting that square peg in the round hole. They're going to be put into a scientific answer that meets their preconceived notions. So when I do the same thing, when I look at anything and I look at this globe and I don't see any kind of evidence that would be sufficient in a court of law or even in a people's court. And yet we've got 90% of the world who will go to bat all day for science and for NASA and make up every excuse in the world why we don't have cameras on the Earth that we live on, and why we don't have 24-hour webcam from the moon. And they'll just say, oh, we can't do it, it's too expensive. But they can send these space shuttles and spaceships billions of miles out into the endless abyss and communicate with them and get pictures back from Mars from 80 million miles, and all that goes just fine. But heaven forbid they do something that the people who pay them their salaries and pay for their equipment wants them to do. So
Absolutely.
It's a big joke. Morgile, you have any questions or anything until we get the ISS footage?
Real quick, I had a couple things for each of the guests. I'll just go through them real quick. Michael in Alaska, what's your major, buddy?
Oh, that's basically undetermined at the moment. I kind of have an interest in everything, so I don't have a specific.
Yeah, no, I know how it goes. It's all good. Just get the credits and then figure it out later. Pete in Morristown, yeah, well said. The Apollo missions and NASA lies and fakery have been apparent to me and a lot of us here for a couple years, but a lot of pieces sort of fit together when you start considering the truth, the flat Earth, stationary Earth model. So well said and agreed with you there. Curtis, I first off wanted to really thank you for your service and also commend you very sincerely for lending your attention to these sort of topics. Coming from a government background, it is difficult to see beyond the certain facades of government, but I just wanted to sort of, applaud you and thank you for looking into that.
Oh, thank you. But it's not needed. Basically, in my experience, it's always been bullshit, so it's like a lot of what we did in the military was bullshit. My war was the Bosnia War. I did 2 tours of duty there, and it was complete bullshit. The Saudi war, bullshit. The first Iraq war was bullshit. The second Iraq war was bullshit. It's all bullshit. We're living a lie, and that lie transitions into even the flat Earth. So it's a full circle. When you start connecting the dots, it basically means that we need to relearn almost everything they've ever told us.
Indeed. Yep. Indeed.
Yep, very good. So, what branch, Curtis, of the military were you in?
I was in the Army Military Police Corps in the Criminal Investigations Division.
Oh, okay, in the Army. That's good. I was I'm a an ex-Air Force guy myself, and
Right.
yeah, that was a long time ago, though. I actually went in initially when I was 17,
Right.
and back in 1978, and had to have my parents sign for me to get in. But the military life just wasn't the thing for me. I didn't like the idea of having everything written down by the book literally, that you had to do, or you were subject to some sort of UCMJ punishment. And I've always been more of a kind of a individual thinker, and I just didn't fit in well with that environment. But the good things that I did get out of the military was, my pilot's license for one. It's very cheap to get your pilot's license in the aero clubs there,
Right.
and I definitely took advantage of that. And I was one of the very last people to get in on the good GI Bill,
Right.
which is long gone at this point.
Right.
But yeah, that's awesome. And so when you were investigating a lot of these false flag operations, did you ever find anything that you concluded was not a false flag and had some legitimacy to it, or was pretty much everything you looked at obvious BS?
Well, the most of the large scale national events, in my opinion, and based on what I've looked at, have all been fake. From Oklahoma City bombing, the face of the building being blown off by a truck bomb.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That was the test run for 911. The first bombing of the World Trade Center, where they actually worked with the people that blew up the building. That was bullshit.
And they were caught red-handed too. I believe it was the FBI that got busted red-handed on that.
Exactly, because the so-called terrorists or the inside guy told them what they were doing, and they allowed it to happen. So what they do is they basically find these people who do have that motivation, and they take them the distance, and they allow them to carry out that, or they actually arrange it and do it themselves, like they did in 911. The 911 thing was a complete psyop of government operation. It was done deliberately to give the result that it got.
And in terms of the Oklahoma City bombing, what I've found is the media sort of used that to alienate or ostracize the militia groups, which really took a big hit after that because they sort of got demonized in the press, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the bottom line, what do I think was real? Maybe some stuff that happened locally that didn't get that much news coverage, maybe. But the big stuff, all the big stuff that we got that we can think of that has charted nationally is most likely a false flag.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah.
One of the, I've been researching conspiracies for almost 2 decades at this point, and one of the most difficult ones I think that for me to get through was the whole Sandy Hook thing, and that was the thing I think that got the most resistance from people,
Right.
because the playing of the heartstrings, oh, you have no compassion for these families and their dead kids and all this stuff, and it's so hard to deal with stuff like that when you know full well that it was a complete farce. It was a complete play. And then when I saw the the January 2013 Super Bowl, and they had the Sandy Hook kids come out and sing at halftime, and I'm looking at that, And it's like, wow, those kids, could they possibly be the same ones? And then all of a sudden everybody started making videos on it. And I'm looking at them, and it's like there's no doubt in my mind that these are the same kids, only just a few years older. And I was just thinking, my God, what an unbelievable tactic to use the same kids, except use their pictures when they were 3-4 years younger, and claim that they were killed. I mean, but you look at stuff like that, and it just goes to show you how absolutely audacious these people will get when they pull off these scams, because I mean, honestly, it's brilliant, if you think about it. But it's just unbelievable that they will go to that level to not get caught or to legitimize it.
Right. Well, there's one I can get a little more specific. The case of the Michael Brown shooting, for example. Something that everyone that I know of online and people I've talked to completely missed. The position of the body.
Is that the one where he's running from the police officer and he shoots him like 6 times in the back?
No,
No, that was a different one.
Actually, they stated that they shot him. It was the big guy that was choking the cop through the car door.
Okay.
Remember, he stole some cigars, or they said right before that, or
yeah,
Right.
I remember it now. Yeah, I've seen it.
Well, the specifics to that made me realize that was a complete false flag, which you don't hear too much of, by the way, was the position of the body. All the shots came from the front of the body, and when the Michael Brown was found, supposedly, if that even was Michael Brown, he was laying on his stomach. And if you look online and you see the video of the position that he was in, he was laying on his stomach. Now, the problem here with that case is, in me understanding law enforcement protocol, after you shoot a suspect, first, you have to justify why you're shooting a suspect. You're shooting that suspect out of fear of your life or the fear of the life of someone else. So it would be an assumption on the part of the person or the officer shooting that person that that person could have had a weapon. So what happens, and sometimes you see this on TV, they immediately handcuff the suspect, even after being shot. So he's on the ground. The cop shot him. He would strategically come over to him. He would put him in handcuffs, and then he would render some type of life-saving protocol. That didn't happen with the Michael Brown shooting, number one. Number two, when the EMTs showed up, how do they know that this guy is dead? He's laying on his stomach. The protocol is to turn the body over and put him on his back, and because that's where he was shot, to the front. No one ever turned the body over. If you look at all the video footage of Michael Brown shooting, he was on his stomach in the street, they claimed, for hours. How did they know that the guy was dead without turning the body over? For example, you got to turn the body over. You have to secure the person, put him in handcuffs, turn the body over, look at his injuries, verify that he's dead. EMTs, for the most part, don't even determine if the person is dead without first taking him to the hospital, unless it's completely obvious where he's been decapitated or something like that. By leaving a person who was shot on his stomach in the middle of the street and not even checking by turning the body over tells me that that's a false flag by itself. It's a complete violation of police protocol. It's a complete violation of EMTs. The entire city would have been sued by the family of the victim because they didn't even make an attempt to save his life after they shot him.
Yeah, and so and after Sandy Hook, the coroner who just had all these crazy stories and didn't make any sense, but if you paid attention to what he was saying, he let all sorts of things slip if you read between the lines of what he's saying.
Right. And no EMTs went into the building to pronounce any children dead. The police pronounced everyone dead. Cops don't do that. We're not trained to do that. So to keep the EMTs outside and have the police be the only ones to enter the building is a complete violation of law enforcement protocol, and it opens your city up for liability claims to say, hey, my kid may have been able to be saved. How come the EMT was not allowed to render first aid?
Yep.
Now,
So
is it true that they train cops to eliminate the threat? Is that, I know a lot of people will see something happen where a cop does, fire 5 or 6 shots and then immediately think that the cop was in the wrong. Are you taught to eliminate the threat?
Well, you're taught to use deadly force. So if you have a suspect coming at you, you're going to pull the trigger, as many times as you feel that you need to stop that person, and you're going to aim for center mass. That's how you're trained as a cop and also as a military person. To have in your mind, I'm going to kill this person. That's not what you're trained. You're trained to draw your weapon, aim center mass, and stop the suspect. In the case of the Michael Brown, he had 8 shots to his front. How are you going to get 8 shots to a person who's fleeing away?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
After the first or 2 shots, he's hitting the ground. How do you get the other 6 shots in him?
Well, you go ahead, Jared.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is I put a clip in one of my recent videos too. There's another one. I believe the man's name was Michael that was supposedly killed, but the video was taken like from behind a chain link fence on a smartphone or something, and it shows the guy running, and the cop draw and shoot him like 6 times in the back. But like if you watch it, you don't see any impact of the projectiles. You don't see any obvious entry or exit. But they claim that he was hit 5 or 6 times, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. And the cop's always looking around, like looking in every direction to make sure nobody sees him, but he never turns around and just looks at the chain link fence when the guy's right there with the cell phone.
Right.
But I mean, this is all an agenda because, if people look at the numbers, I always like to draw numbers out so that people can understand them. That, there's 50 murders in the United States every day. And of those 50, 5 of them are police officers who kill citizens or civilians, and there's only been this year to this point 28 officers killed. And obviously those numbers shouldn't be equal or anything, but what I'm trying to point out is it's on pace to be the safest year to be an officer in close to 30 years. Right. And they tell us all that there's this big war on cops going on, and cops are all feeling scared for their lives, and so they're taking deadlier force. But the truth is that they're trying to get your guns. So when you hear a big case come up like these shootings or what, that's always going to be the reason. That's always going to be the case. Is that when there's 50 murders a day, think of that. They've got 50 murders a day to choose from, and they're going to bring up the ones that are racist. They're going to bring up the ones, and somebody would have to be an idiot to say, of those 50, maybe a couple of them are not race related. They probably are, but there's a lot of people who live here and a lot of things happening, and that's going to happen. It's just, of course we'd all wish it wouldn't, but we know it is. But when they make such a big deal about one, you should get your alert up as to why are they making this big deal? Why is this headline news? Because I think sometimes we hear about a murder and it goes nationwide and it kind of tells people that this doesn't happen all the time. People need to realize it's happening 50 times a day. So whatever one they're putting on CNN and talking about for 2 weeks, there's a reason why.
Right, but you got 50 states, you got over 300 million people. I mean, even if you look at the total numbers, it's still not a epidemic, no matter how you look at it. We lose
no,
more
it seems
people.
high. Yeah, it seems high when you say 50. But no,
Yeah.
when you think of how many, like you said, it's one a state. It's
right.
The
You know,
media
and
definitely exacerbates it by, getting reactions out of people that they want. So there is sort of merit to both sides of it. So it's sort of underreported in the sense that it happens all the time, and they just pick and choose the ones that they want to sort of poster child. But on the other hand, on the law of averages, I mean, I guess somebody walks under a ladder and stubs their toe and gets decapitated every day, right?
Yeah, probably. If you looked up how many people die a year, and by a ladder, it would probably shock you. Probably like 20 people a year get killed by a ladder. That's
Right,
a guess.
exactly.
yeah, it's a control tactic to instill fear in the general public. You know, it is also a tactic to justify police. You got to justify police. How do you do that? You have to sensationalize or even manufacture shootings.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. Problem, reaction, solution.
Absolutely. The Hegelian dialectic, I think
Yep,
that's what it's
the
called.
Hegelian dialect. That is absolutely correct.
Right.
Yep.
There
So
was something actually similar that is to that. That sometimes when I'm heading to school, my mom and I we drive through Newark, and there's a lot of tire replacement places, and we actually saw one of the people actually like throwing nails onto the road, so people's tires like purposely pop, so that they can
Oh,
replace
jeez.
them.
Jackasses.
Like seriously.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So the ISS is finally up. I didn't think they were ever going to turn it on.
Yeah.
It's been on most of the day. I've checked it several times, at least the HD feed, and for the first 15 minutes, I think, of the show, it was offline completely, and they seem to have a new view. If you guys see the one that I'm showing, it's like the lower right-hand corner of the globe.
So this is what something.
Spherical.
So yeah, the spherical everything.
It's spherical.
So here's something funny. I guess I don't understand how you would get this view, and the reason I say that is because if there's no up or down in space, then something that confused me when I was looking at images this week, I saw an image that they took a picture of the globe and then just flipped the camera upside down and took the same picture. And what it does is it moved your view from the top of the globe to the bottom of the globe. So to me, this view that we're looking at just simply means the camera has been turned.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they're
Exactly
not.
right,
It's
yeah.
not like they've flown over. Now they're flying in the lower right-hand corner of the globe. I don't. It doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
It's
So,
it's the same position. They just moved the camera or whatever.
is there a hurricane going on somewhere? It looks like we're coming up on a hurricane here, or something like that. Maybe it's
Oh,
just a big
you
weather
should have seen that one that they called Patricia. What a joke!
Mhm.
Complete fabrication.
Yeah, the 200-mile-an-hour one. Those are the ones that actually make Dave J look good. Nobody was killed, nobody hurt. Whatever.
Right.
And granted, they are completely going over the top with the fear mongering on these things. I think because so much of the stuff that they're doing now just is having a null effect on people. I think people are so burned out by hearing all this emergency this and emergency that, and especially with all the scares that we've gone through, dating back to Y2K, and then the 2003 thing when we were supposed to go through the pole flip, and then 2012, and then September, and it's like people are just getting so conditioned to these things that they don't even care anymore. They're just not even really paying attention, and they're getting a much less low or a much less yield of energy, fear energy, than they would like out of this. So one thing also that I was going to ask you, Curtis, is you seem like you're into a lot of spiritual studies and stuff. What do you think about their use of fear mongering, and how do you believe that affects people spiritually and the overall energy of the population of the planet? Do you think it's something that is really tangible at this point, that they're generating so much fear that they can actually manipulate it, or do you think that they're just kind of running out of gas at this particular juncture?
I believe there's only two types of people on this planet: the conscious and the unconscious. And to be unconscious is to not be in tune with reality. And what I mean by that is these people unconsciously believe in something. They believe that what they're doing is for the benefit of them, at the behest of the population. So what they do is they spew out all these false beliefs. I mean, they have us believing that they have supernatural powers. It's like, oh, they're in tune with Satan, they're Illuminati, they're this, they're that. But they bleed like us, they put their pants on like us, they shit like us. They're human beings. They're
Yep.
human beings that control the very things that we unconsciously value, which is money. So to them, they're staying on top by creating delusion in this world and
Well,
keeping us.
Kim Jong Il does not defecate. I'm pretty sure that's a fact.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, I'm going to run outside real quick and take a video of the ISS if I can, so I'll be back in like 10 minutes, so you can control from here.
Okay, that sounds fair.
Because it looks like it's about to drive right over me, so.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
We'll hold it down here, and it's still spherical.
Still spherical.
Because someone told you.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be at least 10, 15 minutes away from you, but at least that's what I'm seeing on the little map here. I don't know if you can see that.
See, the thing I never understood about the ISS is, like, with all the pictures that they gave us, like, from the Apollo missions and stuff like that, you can so clearly, like, see, like, the defined lines of all, like, the continents. But, like, on the ISS, you can't see, like, any recognizable landmass, like, at all.
No, you never can. It's amazing because we've noticed, in the weeks and weeks that we've been doing this, that whenever, especially at night, whenever they go over, a landmass that, should be clearly visible. I mean, we have clear skies like in Denver, right now fairly much. But, as we can see, the whole planet seems like it's covered in clouds. But they never are able to show any of the populated areas that, would have any of the night lights on. You never see any lightning strikes. The only thing that we're seeing new tonight is we're not seeing any of the cartoonish models of the ISS, hanging out over one of the modules. All we're seeing is just simply pictures. So they kind of seem like they have taken those out of their repertoire and are just showing us, straight images, which are still awful. And I'm sure that even when we go to the night side, we're never going to see any lights. If Jaron could see the ISS theoretically from the ground in Salinas there in California, then by all means, we should be able to see, the city lights from Central California. But I guarantee you that's never going to happen.
Do you want to hear my theory on the new angle of the camera here?
I'd love it.
Okay, well, because I think it was last week, and you guys said that you'd seen it before, but they had the angle to where whatever their, the sun, okay, we'll just call it the sun because that's what it's supposed to be, was shining directly into it, and you could see the make and model of the camera, which isn't supposed to be aboard the ISS. So now they've changed it to a different camera that's not going to have that, steep angle looking right into the sun.
Yeah. That's entirely likely that they could be doing that because I mean, they know that we're looking at this very closely, and some of the things that we've uncovered are absolutely cartoonish. I mean, like the exposed wires with the little BNC connectors that are supposed to be, in scale they would be the size of a big trash can or something. I mean, they would be ginormous, and they just don't make connectors like that. They're all small connectors, and the open wiring was utterly ludicrous that they would have those exposed to the elements up there in the thermosphere, which is what 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's so crazy. And then of course when people question that, then they say, well, there's this lack of air molecules up there, so they'll you'll never be able to tell that temperature, which only makes me wonder how they measured it in the first place. So,
right. Well, see, that's my whole problem with the thermosphere in general is in order to have heat, you have to have molecules close together. I mean, that defies the definition of heat. If the molecules are so spread apart that you can't detect the heat, then it's cold. Dum-dum. No, I'm kidding.
Right? Yeah, no kidding. So that's incredible. So, Pete, we haven't heard a whole lot from you. Do you have any opinion on the ISS? What do you think about it?
Well, like the ISS is pretty it's pretty dumb. It's pretty inconsistent. I was tuned in on the episode where you guys were talking. I'm not sure if it was here on GlobeBusters or if it was something else I was watching where it doesn't really make any sense how they would cool off the ISS at all. Like they would need to have some sort of access to the outside or like some sort of like opening to the outside to let out heat, which of course is impossible unless they're going to be wearing their spacesuits all the time on the inside, which doesn't really seem very practical.
Yeah, it does seem a little bizarre that they seem to violate all the laws of thermodynamics. As to how they either dissipate heat or create the heat. Either way, either in the spaceship or their spacesuits. I shouldn't say spaceship. The ISS, whatever it is, their model up there. But there's so many questions that NASA is just never going to answer. And they're really good questions from a lot of people that are engineers and scientists, and I don't know if you.
Another big one was how do they ground it out? Because anytime that you're using electrical equipment aboard a craft like that, the way airplanes do it is they ground out every time they land. They have a capacitor that stores that charge until they land, and then when they land, they ground out. But you have to dump out that load because eventually, a capacitor can only hold so much. You have to ground that out, and so NASA says they ground it out through just releasing it to the thermosphere, which really doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, it has to ground out. But that's just another one. Another one that I heard was the valves and seals and that sort of thing that just are not present in or are not capable of withstanding the conditions that would be prevalent in the thermosphere. Such items are not known to man.
Yeah, exactly. They don't. Go ahead.
Yeah, like one of the biggest problems I really had with it, which is pretty obvious, is how does it dodge all the debris up there? I mean, they said that they have thrusters on it, but thrusters actually logically can't work in space because that would defy Newton's laws of physics.
Yeah, yes. The tens of thousands of satellites and all the space junk that you never ever see from the ISS ever.
I have a question.
Okay.
How do they transition astronauts out?
Well, they supposedly go back down in any of the escape vehicles, and they come back down and they splash down, kind of like in the old days, when they did that, the Apollo missions. You don't really see that happen too often anymore. Occasionally, the Soviet Union will do a shot where they're supposedly splashing down and then picked up and are being flown in, but you never actually see any of that. But that's how they tell us it's done anyway.
So how do they get new personnel there?
Well, they would be sending it up through one of the spacecraft from, obviously no longer the United States, but from Russia or China or wherever, Japan.
What they do is they dock with it, and then they'll pressurize, the area in between, and then get in there. It's sort of like a sally port, so where they'll have, it's like a two-door little compartment that's pressurized. They dock to it, open one door, let the astronaut in, close the one door, pressurize, and then open the interior door, and they're in. That's supposedly how they get in and out, but when you start seeing air bubbles in space, they're just doing it all in an underwater tank anyways.
Well, yeah, that, and there's no airlocks up there either. I have yet to see a single airlock in any section of the ISS.
Right.
Yep. It's all a big mystery.
And
theoretically, it works.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and also those pods that you said that they escaped from, or the pods that they used to get back down.
Right.
Yeah. Well, apparently they say that all the clothes that are all torn up and worn out, they pile them onto those crafts and they launch them out into the atmosphere and they let them burn up. But that doesn't make any sense because wouldn't that mean that they would have to burn up in the atmosphere whenever they get back down to?
Yeah. It's so ridiculous because they can't do their own laundry up there, because of the water problems and stuff, and the multitude of other problems, the sewage network and all the things that you would need to make a habitable biosphere up there. They just simply don't have. And when you think about the maintenance that's required, I don't know if you guys ever heard the industrial controls guy, I think that wrote into Mark Sargent. and talked to him. Did you hear that or see that?
Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah. I mean, that was crazy. I mean, he went over, every single detail, stating that, these type of systems require constant 24-hour maintenance just about. And, if you know anybody that even has a septic system, my brother-in-law has a septic system, and he says that is the biggest pain in the rear end to maintain. He's constantly doing something to maintain it. So,
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and the big issue, and I think I know the one that you're talking about. It has to do with valves and gaskets, and basically O-rings, like rubber seals. And the thing is, with like O-rings and rubber seals, is they need back pressure, or pressure on the in the outside. If you're in the vacuum of space, as far as we can tell, then those seals should all basically just rupture because they don't have the back pressure necessary to keep the fluids or whatever they're keeping in.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and if they did, they would have to have some sort of housing on the outside of those seals, to pressurize them in. And of course they don't do that. They don't even insulate their open wiring. So
Hey, I'm back, by the way, but I had a question for Morgile. Morgile, have you seen that Buzz Aldrin says that they uh, took off their backpacks on the moon and opened the door and threw them back onto the surface?
Yeah, I remember that. I think there's video of that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
It's like they record the seismic activity of the backpack hitting the ground and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Funny.
So what are you guys thinking of this view here that we've got? It's kind of pretty.
Fake.
It's fake, but it's kind of pretty. I mean, you got to give them credit for at least adding a little splash of color in on it. And I don't know. I think they're trying to show an example of a Terminator line there that's coming towards us, but yeah, fake.
So bad.
I have another question. I've seen a video where an astronaut did the experiment on the moon where he dropped a hammer and a feather.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, when he did that, and he was supposedly on the moon, what was the temperature outside?
Hot enough probably to burn up the feather, or
250.
cold enough. Yeah, 250 Fahrenheit or Celsius. How hot does it get up there?
It's really hot during the day and then really, really cold at night. Yep.
Yeah, it should have gone from 250 to negative 250 just from walking from the sun to the shade.
Right. Okay. So I was like, how did the feather survive that test?
Yeah, 253 Fahrenheit to as low as minus 387 Fahrenheit on the moon.
Okay.
It was an indestructible feather.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a moon feather from the moonbirds.
Yep.
Yeah.
All I know is those tires had to be some freaking heavy-duty tires that they had on those like little rover thingies that they were driving around too.
It's really funny because when you actually go back and dissect a lot of NASA's assertions, they're just really, really just blatantly lying. And you bring up a real good point with the feather. I mean, that's just another example. I'm hopefully finishing a video this weekend where I'm covering the Pioneer 10 mission to Jupiter, which I mentioned last week. But yeah, they even faked that. So.
Yeah. Did you guys see that they've kind of snuck in? It looks like a solar collector here into the frame now. As the Earth has disappeared, now the solar collector is completely lit up. At least I'm pretty sure that's what that's supposed to be.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
It's like now what angle of sunlight would give you such an intense reflection off that collector, and then not be able to see anything that far down, on the Earth?
It really looks underwater here to me. That's just my observation. It really, really looks underwater.
To be honest, that's like the most realistic thing I've ever seen on the ISS. I mean, to be honest, if the whole ISS was supposed to be as high as it was, there would be like no magnetic sphere, I think it is, that would be defending it from the blasts of radiation that the sun gives off, and the whole thing should be just like a giant hunk of glowing metal that's just melting up there.
Yeah, it should.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, shouldn't the astronauts just getting blasted by radiation the entire time they're on the moon? There's no atmosphere to protect them.
Yeah, they would be absolutely getting blasted by radiation, heat temperatures, you name it, micrometeorites,
Space debris.
Yeah, yeah, crashing NASA satellites, whatever.
Did you guys see some stupid report that said that Comet Lovejoy exerts the equivalent of 500 bottles of wine every second or something? Did you see that?
What?
Oh, yeah, I'll find it for you. It is hilarious. Somebody
What
sent it
is
to me in
what
an
does that
email.
even mean?
I don't even know. That's the whole point. They just have to come out with a story every day. So they say something happened. Either they found 500 new galaxies or a super Earth, or you could look up. Cat Williams does a pretty funny comedy bit about super Earth. He's just going on like super Earth, like this Earth is pretty super. I don't need to know about any super Earths.
Yeah,
He's funny.
that's just crazy. So it looks like our ISS feed just went offline for the time being. So that's okay.
The
That's a big
24-hour a
surprise.
day live feed that really equates to about 12 minutes an hour.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're just showing a live blue screen, and then the other one is just saying offline. So I thought I'd bring up really quick, just FYI, the pilots and stuff out there. I found this video this week. Somebody had posted this in one of the chat comments, and I thought it was amazing because, as most of you know, I'm a pilot, and we were always taught, that the way that the airplanes lift up into the air, they actually attain lift by an effect called the Bernoulli principle. And essentially what that means is that when the airplane is traversing the sky, because of the shape of the wing, where you have a curved wing on the top and kind of flat on the bottom, what it does is the wind going over the top of the wing goes over faster than the wind at the bottom of the wing, which actually creates a low pressure zone above the wing. And so this low pressure zone is supposed to create a vacuum that kind of sucks the wing up from the top side, and that's what we were always taught that caused lift in an airplane. So
Yep.
this guy comes out with this video, and I would recommend everybody go check it out. Planes float, they don't fly. And one of the things that he brought up in this is absolutely elementary pilot 101 stuff, and it just blew me away because I'm looking at it, and what he's basically saying is that when you have what's called a symmetrical wing type, which means it has the exact same curvature on the top as it does the bottom. Whoa, what was that?
A tugboat was coming through.
Oh, okay. Anyway, when you have a symmetrical wing, that was good. It basically gives you the same speed of air going over the top of the wing as it would the bottom. And he showed this by showing that airplanes can fly inverted with no problem. So here's the diagram of what I was talking about. The air pressure over the top is lower, so it kind of creates this vacuum that's sucking it up over the top and lifting the plane up from the top of the wing. Well, when you look at a symmetrical wing, which does not have this problem, you see that that's impossible because the speed of the air is going the same speed over the top and the bottom. Therefore, their whole idea and what they're teaching us about the physics of how a wing produces lift is actually very false. And he's very right about this. And I looked at that and I thought about it for the longest time. And it's like, how could me, or anybody really be taught something like this, be told something absolutely contrary to the physics of the wing, a symmetrical wing works, and we were just so instantly duped by it that we bought it 100%. So it just goes to show you, even the things that we take for granted and we think are legitimate science, you have to go back and reconsider these things and see, gee, is this philosophy that they're teaching us actually true, or does it not make any sense whatsoever? And in the case of this video, that kind of blows away the Bernoulli principle for the lift of a wing. So any pilots out there or anybody that has any comments on this, I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say, and I'm sure Landell N here on this video would love to also hear what you have to say, because I look at this and I can't debunk what he's saying. It makes absolute sense. It's just crazy.
Well,
Very
and
interesting.
what's even funnier to me though is the assumptions that we take for granted, including gravity, which were of course theorized in a Newtonian worldview that didn't have planes or electromagnetism. So, that's just sort of a bigger example of the same exact thing.
Right. Well, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
Every time I hear anything about wings of a plane, I always think about the World Trade Center being penetrated and the wings going into the building. It,
Yeah,
I mean, the whole airplane breaks through concrete and steel. That
yeah.
blows my mind.
A
Yeah, no,
pressurized aluminum can.
no inertia, right? Because you'd think the wings would have sort of separated from the fuselage of the plane because of their inertia upon impact, but it just glides right through like butter.
Right.
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
weird.
It's like all these hints that we have, all these things, and people just will turn their back to them. It's like, why did we lose MH370 if people's beliefs that the GPS is in space, then the plane is closer to space and we wouldn't lose any plane ever. But when you look at the flat Earth concept and you look at the southern hemisphere being pretty much twice as big as they say it is, and there's no ground stations that are going to cover that distance, then it makes sense why planes in the southern hemisphere can just disappear from our GPS when that would never happen if GPS was space-based. Every plane would be tracked, for every minute. It would just be right. You would know exactly where it's at. So I really wish people who believed in science understood that it is no better than a religion. Sure, it's got its positives, but you have to believe in science. You have to have faith in science. You can't just, and that's what they do. They have decided you have to make a choice to say, I'm going to trust science. And that's the same choice that a Christian makes by saying, I'm going to trust my upbringing, or I'm going to trust this book. And they come across as they're so holier than thou, and they've found the answer to life, which is just believing what men have said years ago and wrote in a book. And it's like, that's the same damn thing. It's crazy.
Scientism.
There it
Yes.
is. So I'll read you this article. I dropped a link there, Bob, in the chat. Says, for the first time ever, scientists have detected ethyl alcohol, the kind that makes the kind that makes booze, in emissions from a comet. Comet Lovejoy, it turns out, is quite aptly named the ball of ice and dust, which releases the equivalent of 500 bottles of wine each second during its peak activity, and it also emits a type of sugar. It's like they must do like I don't know. They put a bunch of words in a hat and then they draw out different words and they got to put those together into a space story. Somebody got 500 bottles of wine and how are we gonna fit this in? And they had to mix it with sugar and Comet Lovejoy, and they just put it together.
Like the image I really. Oops, sorry.
No, I just said they're mad libbing it.
Yeah, Mad Libs. There you go.
But like the image, like when Jared said that immediately came into my head was just like this rock just flying through space with like a thruster just launching, like propelling itself with a bunch of wine bottles or something. Pretty ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to show that link, Jern. I did for a little bit, and then it started playing some annoying commercial in the background. I know you guys couldn't hear it, but
And this thing costs $50 million a year, right? That we're watching, is that right, or is it $50 million a what?
The ISS is.
No, just the live feed.
Oh yeah, I remember somebody said that last week.
yeah, I did. It was I'm not exactly sure about the 50. It was definitely a seven-figure number though, that they were charging us for it, and
Well,
I just
suck. They suck. Period.
Yeah, it's impossible to believe that a camera on a data stream, that you would think that they would have this massive data stream, and this little bitty HD camera feed would not be any problem at all whatsoever to incorporate on this large data stream. But
Could you imagine Darth Vader having like ISP problems, like Darth Vader on the phone with AT&T or something?
You have failed me for the last time. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. So let's see. Yeah, we're still offline on the ISS, the dogs, but that's okay. So, all right, I'm going to look in the chat and see if anybody has anything. It looks like just pretty normal activity there. Do you guys have any questions at all, Curtis, Michael, or Pete?
Yeah, if you guys got anything you want to ask any of us or
Yeah, I
anybody
do.
in the chat does while we wait patiently for
Yeah,
ISS.
yeah, I have a question. I'm confused about the moon. Um,
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
they claim that the moon impacts the tides. How does that work? I can't wrap my mind around the logic behind that.
Oh,
There's
that,
lots of
that
theories
involves
on it.
Well, I'd say one thing that
predicting like.
well, I'll just say
Oh, go
one
ahead.
thing that's kind of been come out to me as being clearly evident as far as the Coriolis effect, which is very small, if anything. But if you just think about the sun and the moon going around in a clockwise motion, if you think about that, the air that's in the north, so to the right, is going to rotate clockwise because that pressure and energy that's moving with the sun and the moon, everything inside of that, so the north, would rotate clockwise. And then everything to the outside of that, as things are going around, is going to push off to the left, which is going to rotate counterclockwise. So when you think about that, then you have to think that everything underneath that, which is going to be water for the most part, is getting kind of tugged along underneath the moon and the sun. And after it pulls it for so long, it's not going to have an effect on it anymore, which is going to cause it to flow back. Like it's going with it, now it flows back, and then it's going to kind of try and reset itself, right? Which is going to be about the time that the other one comes through. So that's where I get 2 a day from. Of course, there's a lot of theories and testing that needs to be done, but I just think a lot of what is explained is so easily explained when you look at the ether and the idea of, um, you know, electromagnetism and all this stuff rotating. Everything that comes off of that makes sense on a flat Earth. I mean, just think about the Coriolis effect and a sphere. Why the hell does the sphere spinning cause wind to go different directions?
Right.
Depending on which whether you're on the top or the bottom, yeah, it really doesn't make any sense when you dissect it.
Yeah, what the hell's the difference? I mean, it's like these are the kind of things that they tell us, and we all just go, "Okay, teacher, whatever you say," and I'll make sure I get the right answer on the test. But think about a ball spinning. Take a basketball and spin it on your hand, and then tell me why the wind would be any different on the bottom of that basketball versus the top.
Right.
And why there's even wind when they tell us that the atmosphere is protected. Who knows?
So
Yeah.
in the flat Earth model, we're not moving, but space is moving around us.
I
Well,
would
the
say
way,
above us, but
yeah, the way I would say is, and you know, I could be wrong about this, but I think our whole idea of space being infinite is wrong. And if you can sort of think about it that way, it sort of puts things into perspective where, you know, the stars in the night sky and the sun and the moon are really just features of our world. And so whatever's compelling those celestial bodies to spin around, like Jaron said, clockwise, you know, that does have effects here on Earth. And there are debates as to whether or not the moon actually does cause the tides, but there is some evidence to suggest that it does. And that could be anything from, well, it's certainly not gravity because, you know, on the flat stationary model, we don't need gravity.
Yeah.
In the sense that most people understand gravity as a warping of space-time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't
correct.
think, I think that the reason that they pin the whole gravity thing on the moon, as causing the tides is because, the moon in their model is much closer to us than the sun. Now, in the models that I've considered, I find it much more likely that it is the sun that is causing not only the tides but the Coriolis effect because of its diamagnetic influence on the saltwater in the seas. It is a proven fact that electromagnetism is will actually repel water because water has diamagnetic properties. So if you have the sun, which appears to be this huge plasma explosion, with high electrical currents flowing all around it, we know that whenever there is a current flowing, it produces an electromagnetic field. And so it would seem much more likely that the sun being somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 miles above us, in a constant state of plasma eruption, in a plasma charge, is actually generating the electromagnetic field that is influencing the tides, as well as any Coriolis effect that might be observed from that. So, but as far as the moon, a lot of people have done studies on it, and they can really find no legitimate correlation between it and what they're seeing is the reason that it's causing the tides. And I tend to agree with that. I think it's more the sun for sure.
You think there's a chance that the sun is closer?
Right,
Come on,
that's
Bob.
what I was about to say.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I was even thinking for a while that Dave Johnson was right, and that the moon was only what did I say, 33 miles up or something like that. And then it occurred to me, this whole perspective issue. But, and it all started, from just plain observation when you were looking,
Right.
Jared, you had done a video, and we're looking out that plane window, and it's like, damn, that thing looks like it is right there, directly abeam the aircraft. And so you would think that if it was actually 4,000 miles, it would still have a considerably higher perspective, from the airplane than literally right out the window,
Yeah, and that's why I don't think that they can be measured, and I could be very wrong in that. And Morga, I like mentioning some of these things to you because I know that as you're doing your research, maybe something will pop out. But I had a little theory that I called Bob with. This is a couple months back, but I told him that the more I kept looking at the idea of the moon and the sun and the eclipse, and I'm sure you've seen this too, it just looks funny when you look at a solar eclipse. That the perfect disk that comes moving over the sun, and for the most part in the videos I've seen, it almost comes moving slowly and then it stops when it covers the sun and stays there for a little while and then moves on. Like, it just looks fake to me. And I know people say, oh, eclipses aren't fake. I said, okay, that's fine. I'm just saying that it looks fake in the footage. So I started to think, well, why would they need to do that? And then I started thinking, well, wait a second. What if the moon goes behind the sun? And they need, and I wouldn't even have a guess as to how they would go about doing this, but it was just something that I was thinking about because it made more sense to me that the moon going behind the sun would disprove all of cosmology. And they would need to produce something that from the Earth would look like, nope, that's the moon going in front of the sun. That's nothing else is going on. And what it might be going behind it, especially if we're talking about them being the same distance away from the Earth. And I don't so much believe that anymore because I have no evidence of it. But just something I would mention that maybe you've seen something that would lead you to that.
And I know what you're saying, and it really is that, well, I like to say the more we study the sun and the moon, the more of a mystery they become, and that really is the case, especially when you study the sun from like the vantage point of a weather balloon many miles up. But it's almost like, and the Bible does a really good job describing it, but it's almost like the sunlight is a fluid light, but when it hits our atmosphere, the atmosphere like glows up all around it like a sapphire would if you hit it with a laser beam. And so what we see as the sun and what we experience as the sun here on Earth is really more of just an experience of that fluid light, and we're not necessarily witnessing a solid round body, spherical body in the sky. It's just very bizarre the more you study it. And I'm still, part of me wants to say, the moon seems like to be a physical object, but part of it seems like it's not a spherical object. And the relationship to the sun, moon, and the phases of the moon is really kind of mishmash. But there is some relationship when you look at solar eclipses. They're always on a new moon. So that sort of does jive with the sun, having the effect of the phases of the moon, depending on where you're looking at it from. But yeah, it's just the more you look at it, the more of a mystery it becomes almost.
Now,
Crazy.
when you say a fluid light, are you talking about like a light in a fluid, Or what do you mean by
Well,
that?
you know, like if you've seen the hot air or the weather balloon footage where you can see there's a hot spot directly beneath the sun, it's almost like you can tell exactly how far the sun is from that hot spot. But if you were underneath that hot spot you might think was the sun just because it's a concentration of that light beaming through that particular layer of substance. And so in that respect, the sunlight obviously emanating in all directions, but it's almost like a fluid light. It's hard to explain, but it's almost like it flows like a fluid, and then when it hits the atmosphere, it expands like lighting up a sapphire. Weird.
And I
Well,
think so much of the science is wrong. When we went to the beach just last week, we took some images of the sun, and from what I can tell, and I still can't, prove this either, but I mean, it looks like the sun flips during the day because I think that the sunspots will change their position morning to evening, meaning if the sun rises and the sunspots are on the bottom, it will set with them on the top. Now, of course, you won't hear this from anybody in science. You won't see it when you go to Soho and look at the sun. But get your camera out and take pictures in the morning when it's behind some clouds, and then in the evening, and then tell me that's not what it's doing.
Yeah, it's almost like it spins like a wagon wheel as it goes through its course, right? Almost
Exactly,
like
just
that
like the
cannon.
moon does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just exactly like the moon does. I was curious if I was going to actually check and see if they made a like a solar filter for my camera, because I think it'd be great to actually investigate that, Jaren, and see if those sunspots are actually rotating around like that. I mean, theoretically, it sounds very plausible, but you don't really ever see it, that happen on the Soho feeds. But then again, I tend to think that those Soho feeds are highly doctored. In fact, I know they are.
Oh, and remember I showed you when I had images of the sunspots on the bottom right, and when I went to Soho, they were on the top right. So I mean, but again, then is somebody just going to say, well, that's because it was being viewed from the southern hemisphere, and you're viewing it from, they can make up excuses for anything they want.
well, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just full of questions. The ice wall. Wouldn't the ice wall, wouldn't there be concerns about the sun melting the ice wall?
Um, Not really, because the sun doesn't ever get that close to it. I mean, if you look at it, it kind of goes in between the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. And if the outside of the Earth, where the Antarctic wall would be, is actually
Permafrost, it's been there for, as far as we can tell, thousands of years.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think that the sun would ever get close enough to it. And not only that, if there is any truth at all to this, the infinite plane, or that, there's something going on even beyond that Antarctic wall, there's going to be an area where there is virtually no sunshine at all. And I think that's probably pretty much the case anyway when you get, that far south. And the videos.
I think you'd run into problems when you start to get to beyond the Earth's electromagnetic field in terms of being able to, accurately process reality in a familiar sort of way in terms of how light behaves and how even things like we take for granted, like friction, behave, and who knows.
Yeah, I agree totally. And our brains are obviously they're electromagnetic. They fire on electrical impulses, and I honestly wonder if we got out of the influence of the Earth's magnetic field, if if that would have a very profound effect on the electrostatic and electromagnetic impulses going through our brain. In other words, could we even survive it? I don't know.
I would say no.
More study is definitely needed, and we definitely, in order to get that far, we got to get rid of that stinking Antarctic and Arctic treaties.
Yeah.
I
So,
agree.
so the sun. So since there would be no sun near the retaining wall, that side of the Earth would be completely dark.
At night, what do you mean? Well, remember, so the sun is going to be on the outer rim
Yeah,
doing a
that side
rotation
is a little misleading to say that side.
Right.
because it would be all the way around. Possibly. Again, I mean, we don't know the map of the Earth, and that's the problem. And again, these globe earthers are going to go around and say, well, you flat earthers don't know what you're talking about, where we do because we have a map of the. No, you were given a map that works, and we have no map that works because we haven't measured it. We haven't gone out and done the work that they were able to do to get their lie across. And it's not just as simple as their story explains it, and we don't have one, so they have to be correct. No, by all means, that is a incorrect way to look at it.
I think the Gleason's map is a good map to use, but even that is really sort of questionable. But I like the Gleason's map.
That's the one I look at all the time. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
for what you'll see is, and I don't know how familiar you are with the model, but if you don't understand sort of the basics of it, then none of it makes sense. I like a quick way to explain it is like a dartboard with North Pole being directly in the center bullseye. The northern hemisphere is the next ring out from the bullseye. Then the next ring out is the southern hemisphere, and then all the way around the outside edge of the board is what you would call Antarctica, which in the globe model they sort of wrap it down and tuck it all underneath the bottom of a ball, but that's not apparently that's not what it is. Apparently Antarctica encompasses the entire flat world, which is sort of convex, but it's not a inverted ball either as far as we can tell.
Did you know that 93% of people live in the northern hemisphere?
I
Yep.
believe it. I believe
Yeah, it's
it.
crazy. Only 7% below the equator, which is insane. One
Yeah,
thing I was going to say about the sun real quick, this is just an experiment that I did that everyone can do at home because it's easy and makes sense and will help you understand. One of the biggest questions I keep hearing from people about the sun is they don't understand how the sun sets and appears to go beyond the horizon, and they say, well, it only can be setting down on a ball. It would never set like that on a flat Earth. You'd be able to see it forever. Well, if you have an iPhone, I don't know what kind of phone you have, but if you take your iPhone and turn it on and turn on the camera, put it on video and turn on the flash so that you have that light, and you set it up against the wall upside down so that the light is shining, and you go about 15 or 20 yards away from the phone, and if you lay down with your cheek on the floor, you cannot see the light because you'll see the floor is covering your view. It's everything that I learned at the beach this week has taught me everything about perspective, that everything in front of you is seen first. So anything behind that will always be lower, no matter what it is, unless it's taller. If things are stacking up, well, yeah, you can see mountains that are taller than shorter mountains in front of you. But if anything is level or about level, those things are always going to disappear because of the ground. Well, as the sun goes away from you, it gets so far away that eventually it is beyond your perception. And you can just do a quick 20-yard test of that with your phone and see that that light is clearly an inch off the floor. But by just laying your head down on the carpet or wherever you're laying your head down, you can't see that light anymore, which will teach you, and you'll see what's in the way. The floor is in the way. You can't see the inch-high light because your floor has taken over your point of view. So try that. Have fun with it.
Yeah, the way that we perceive distant objects is definitely skewed by the laws of perspective. And when you're talking about celestial bodies, even stars and the sun, our eyes do deceive us in a sense that the vanishing point here on the ground is much closer than the vanishing point would be in the sky, just simply due to the natural laws of perspective. But the objects are so large that they really don't shrink too much in size as they move outside of our visual reality. They're just going beyond the vanishing point in the sky, and no, you wouldn't be able to see the sun forever on the flat Earth. It's not meant to be that way. That's not how our eyes work.
So as far
Not how
as
reality works.
right, just so I can wrap my mind around the whole concept of the flat Earth, the sea floor, the crust of the sea floor, what would be holding that up, if that makes any sense? Because I'm visualizing sort of I guess a bowl or a cup of water, so the Earth is primarily water, so something, and we know that the ocean has a sea floor.
Yes.
Okay, let me put it this way, and this is just my opinion. Again, the other guys can all answer their opinion.
Right.
But I believe that the creator, or whatever created where we live did it in a way that we would unmistakably recognize it as a creation. So the idea of the fact that the Earth is a never-ending plane, as far as we can tell, meaning that the horizon always rises up to our eye level,
Right.
doesn't stay at our feet like it would if we were on a ball, tells me that number one, it's a flat plane. Number two, we've drilled 8 miles deep and hit a bottom so hard that it broke the drills. And the deepest ocean that we've ever been to in the Mariana Trench is 7 or 8 miles deep. So after 8 miles, you are prevented from going any further than that. I also believe we don't go to space. There is no, like Morgile said, there is no never-ending space. There is no never-ending galaxies. So I look at it as the created place where we are meant to live. And the reason that I am recognize it as a creation is because it doesn't. I don't need anything beyond that. I don't need what science came and made up by saying, no, we're a ball floating in a orbit, a never-ending orbit that's perfectly still and fluid, and we don't feel any jostling or vibrations as we rotate the sun, and there's all these different planets and stars moving around and doing all these different things, and none of it affects us at all. And I mean, that whole thing is a story in my mind to erase what was put right in front of our eyes, so you can't deny it. You watch a seed grow, and you know that that has intelligence behind it, that there's a reason why it does what it does. And you look at the way your body works, and the way your body knows to digest, and the way your throat knows how to swallow without you having to tell it anything. These things are built to work, and built to work well. The sun, the moon, the tides, the seasons, everything is so perfect, and it should be painstakingly obvious of this is a creation, this is a construct of intelligence, and from that we can start venturing outside of that. But somebody came along 500 years ago and simply took what we have and realized, and if you look at the Masons on the level and they square the circle and circle the square, you know, all they're doing is they took their geometry and said, hey, we can take this never-ending flat plane, and since there's a rim to it, meaning a position we can't go further than, if we wrap that into a ball, everything makes sense, except for the fact that it makes no sense. On a ball, you don't have straight lines. It makes no sense. There is straight lines. There is absolutely straight lines in life. We know what a straight line is. They tell us no. Every line, every position from point A to point B on a ball is curved, and the whole thing is horseshit. And it's just like, you know, you asking me that, what's underneath the Earth, what's holding the Earth up? Well, you know, in the ball Earth model, what's holding the Earth up? Okay, gravity. Well, what's holding space up?
Right.
What is, you know? So I mean, to me, it's not even something I don't think we are supposed to know.
Right.
And what somebody did is came and said, we know, and here it is, and you'll never see it. You better just believe me.
Do you think that one reason why they went there, as far as making it circular, is it because everything that they see in the sky is circular, so they would assume that we're also circular?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I know that doesn't explain shit, but
Well, no, because when we look in the sky and we see this, you know, the circular sun, and we see the circular moon, and we can see the wandering stars that appear to be spherical when we look at them through concave lenses like telescopes in our eyes. But yeah, absolutely, I think that it's a logical misunderstanding to assume that, well, there's all those spheres in the sky, so therefore we must also live on a sphere in the sky. And yeah, it seems to me like a logical misconception, but it's certainly incorrect.
Do you think that today it's a misconception, or do you think that around 100 years ago or something they knew and have just continued the story?
well, no, the same argument could be said for the person on the Earth. It appears flat, so I don't think it was a brilliant assumption to say that the Earth was flat in the ancient time, because it looks flat. I mean, it's
Right.
obvious. And I don't think it's brilliant to say it's circular. I just think it's man's attempt to try to understand reality, and they really don't understand it.
Here, I'll tell a little story, and this is kind of my own version of events. this is what I think happened. I actually think that even the ancients did believe that the Earth was a ball. And I say that because if you would have been, and I'm going back and saying 2,000 years ago, if you would have sent boats in every direction, you would have seen them disappear over the edge. That's what you would have thought that you saw. When you walked from the north to the south, you would see the stars change, and you would then look at the stars, like Morgile said, look at the moon, look at the sun, and come to some sort of conclusion that we were a ball. Okay, so at that point, I think that they decided, look, the Bible says it's flat. We can prove the point that this is a ball. We can prove it and beat religion once and for all, and mankind will win. Science, hooray. So they did their job. They got their best mathematicians. They came up with their theories. It wasn't like they had all the answers at the beginning. Remember, Copernicus thought the sun was 3 million miles away. And it took them, Newton, and it took them all these different things, and even Einstein was just added to give it more validity. But I think around 1900 or something, and it might have been before that, they realized they had made a mistake. And this is the conundrum that science is in, is they came out and made a mockery of the church and said, we know the truth, you don't, you're preaching out of a book, you're idiots, we're science, we know the truth because we've tested it, etc., etc. Well, 1900 comes around, and now science realizes their mistake. Here's the problem. If they dare say they made a mistake, they have completely destroyed science. The credibility of every scientist across the world goes in the shitter, and religion raises the book up and walks around as the victor. And so part of me understands what's going on. The other part of me says, I don't care. It's about the truth. We have 7 billion people on this earth that are being lied to. It's time we are out with it. And I'm sorry, science, that you went around, saying how much better you were. It looks like the book was right. And I can understand that we didn't realize. And again, these are just my opinions. It's what I think has happened and where we are. So I understand why science has to fight this, because it will be the end of science as we know it, because it will completely have to be all started over, and it should be, because our foundations are wrong. Right. If you're building any kind of argument based on the ball Earth, well, you can make anything work, but it doesn't mean it's reality.
Right.
Yeah, that's
well said.
Yeah, that is very well said, Jaron. That makes a lot of sense. But one other thing that I would mention about this, you were asking what was on the bottom of the Earth, essentially, and it's really kind of hard to tell. I mean, there's Vedic cosmology, which gives you some rather interesting metaphors, like saying that there's an elephant, that we're on the back of an elephant or something
right.
like that.
A turtle.
A turtle or an elephant,
yeah,
or
you got elephants balancing the edges of the world. It's pretty weird.
Right.
That's a big ass turtle.
Right. Yeah. But you have to think about it. It's like if we are on a plane, okay, and we are actually in an enclosed system, which I think that more and more evidence seems to point that way, then you always have to ask what's on the other side. So if what we're looking at when we look up and we see the stars is actually a firmament with lights in it, then I've always wondered what's on the other side of that, what's beyond that, and then what's below us. I can't really accept the idea that space is finite. It is in our domain here, especially if we're in an enclosed system, which, like I said, I believe we are. But, there's other scriptures and other texts that talk about, super universes and, universes that are beyond this one, whether they're interdimensional or whether they're just outside of our little protective dome that we're inside of here, our little, space that we have. That is something that nobody on Earth really knows, I think, unless you're in the a secret society that actually disperses that type of information. But who knows? But if we are in our own little flat plane here, what's beyond the edges? What goes beyond Antarctica? Does it drop off into something that actually is space, like NASA shows us, or does it continue on infinitely? Again, these are all good questions, and nobody can really provide a sound answer to that. short of getting outside the firmament, I guess, if you will, or if that is even possible in this reality.
Right.
Well, and, Bob, if I can, and it's funny because, well, first of all, I tend to not think it's an enclosed system, but, again, it's really up for debate until we can do a full geodetic survey of the southern region. But one thing that I did sort of uncover in my etymological research here recently is the word firmament is a bit of a misnomer. The original word in the Hebrew or the ancient text was rak, R-A-Q, or rakia, which essentially means an expanse or to stretch out across the sky. And it was only until later translations where we get the idea of, firmament in meaning like strong or a physical, solid, structural firmament. That's it really is a mistranslation and a misnomer. Just
Yeah,
to
and
add that in.
that makes sense, and I understand that. And again, we haven't necessarily run into anything like bonk. We ran into a glass crystalline structure. However, if we are to believe any of the science that's out there, like for example, what the University of Colorado and other universities discovered about this electromagnetic firmament, which seems to have properties like like it's something solid.
Sure. Yeah.
You just got to wonder. I mean, but the whole problem is, I can't believe that the whole world necessarily is in on a conspiracy. I believe that a large majority of the world has been duped,
Right.
by this conspiracy. But I think that there's still a lot of honest researchers out there, and the universities. These people are using their high-tech equipment, and they are detecting something out there, or at least that's what they're reporting to us. And then when we get other astronomy departments from other universities saying, yep, sure enough, there's something there, whether it's a plasma or electromagnetic shield or a crystalline shield, which gives us our Libyan desert glass that's such a mystery. It's hard to tell. But I think, for me personally, the descriptions in the Bible and also the descriptions from other religions lead me to believe that there is something physically tangible up there. I might be wrong, but who knows? None of us really know. But
Right.
that's just kind of what what I'm leaning towards. And if ever any evidence comes up to prove to the contrary, I'll greet it with arms wide open. But we have to kind of take what we can get, and unfortunately, we're very bridled in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. The best ideal out, in my opinion, is that the Earth is flat. My question is, are we the new Galileo? Because when Galileo came out with his ideas, he was ostracized, right, by the church.
Right.
So it's like, it's like, okay, is it really an attack on the church, or was it just someone coming out with a different idea that was opposite the church? Because he wasn't necessarily uh, popular opinion of the time, and so it's like, and how do you make that a conspiracy against the church? That's the part I don't get.
Well, I think it can be done after the fact, because if you think about it, basically I've come to the realization that anything 50 years or more ago can be easily changed. Maybe not so much today, but definitely if you think of
Yeah, with a
in
new
19
generation. Yeah.
right, in 1900, could they have rewritten history from 1850? Probably really easily. People barely had newspapers.
Right.
So at that time it would have been quite easy. And if you've ever seen 1984, in the Ministry of the Truth and those kind of things, it's basically the same story. And so what they did is, in my opinion, because if you look at Galileo, number one, he died blind, right? And number two, the big bad Catholic Church who burns people at the stake imprisoned him in home arrest in his grotto.
Yeah, in his castle.
Yeah, I mean, so how that's a bad punishment for somebody who is a heretic so bad that they've made the world spin. So instead of burning him at the stake, we're gonna just let him die his last. So it almost seems to me that he just lived out the end of his life in his castle, died out regularly, and then they rewrote the story as a way to make the church look bad. Now, at that time, I think that they may still have believed that he was right. I don't think that's the case anymore, but who knows?
Right. Right.
But I think it is
Yeah.
possible to fathom that. But I like what you said, because I actually see it that way too. That science loves to bring that up, right? Anybody who's a believer in science says, what about Galileo and the way the church treated him, and they don't understand it when they come and comment on these videos and say, you're saying that the Earth is flat? Oh, you freaking idiot! You're so stupid. How does anybody in today's age think that? Well, that is the exact same thing that they love to tell us happened to Galileo. He was coming out and saying, I think these things could be possible. I think it is possible that the Earth goes around the sun and that we're spinning, and they all told him how crazy and stupid he was. And they all think that's the biggest atrocity in the history of science, that we didn't let somebody speak who had evidence. Well, here we are with evidence that the ball doesn't work, that the ball isn't realistic, it doesn't portray reality, it can't be filmed, it can't be measured, it can't be seen, and yet they won't allow us to even speak. It's the same thing.
Right. Damn, just a lot of craziness.
Okay. Also, if anybody's wondering what we've been watching for the past several minutes, this is the footage that I took of the moon the night before the eclipse, and also now what we're viewing is the night of the eclipse. I just thought I'd show this in the background a little bit. I have since taken a lot more moon footage, and it's all really spectacular. Gotta love this camera. But I just think it's really interesting to look at the moon because, I look up at it and I wonder what it is too. You may have noticed earlier that on the extreme close-ups that it looked almost like broken glass or crystalline. It has so much of a crystalline structure to it. And my wife, Cammie, says that, it looks like, a big piece of, I believe she said demantoid, which is another mineral. And yet, there's a lot of things that make me think that maybe it is a projection, like when you can see the, stars behind it. And I don't know if those are stars or if those would be like what would be called inclusions in the crystal. But, when you look at it, it certainly seems sometimes to have very solid form, especially when you look at it so up close. I just think it's really interesting to stare at. So that's what we've been looking at for the past few minutes, in case anybody's been wondering.
Well, in terms of eclipses, there's a theory that there's a third sort of celestial body similar to the sun and the moon that doesn't reflect light in such a way that we can see it, but it does, obviously eclipse the sun and the moon, or at least the moon during lunar eclipses. So there is a theory that's been around for quite a while about that that does make some degrees of sense.
Yeah.
And it really just lends more credence to, the fact that we really don't have a well, I guess the best way to put it is we don't have all our faculties about us because we can't see most ranges of light. We can only see the visual spectrum, and we can't hear most ranges of sound. So, I like to say we're mostly blind and deaf, right?
Well,
Yeah.
what kind of item do we not see if light is being reflected off of it?
Well, I think what he was referring to is Rahu and Ketu.
Right, yep.
And that's a mystery because, here we are looking at this eclipse, and if the Earth is flat, then obviously we know that there's no way that it's passing between the sun and the moon. So what are we seeing here? And this is, the explanation of some of the older traditions would say that this is Rahu that we're seeing that's causing this eclipse effect. What it is, no idea, but it's obviously something if we're going to dismiss the idea that the Earth is a ball, and we are going to stick to the idea that it's a flat plane, then what is it precisely that's causing this effect that we're witnessing right now?
Well, to me it can't be something physical that light is hitting that we don't see the reflection of. We know that
I agree. It could be electromagnetic, causing
Right.
different phases. Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's my thought. Or if you look at like the Mark Sargent model that he uses, the roulette Earth or whatever. But have you noticed there's that little star that sticks up right in the middle,
Yes.
like Polaris or something?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if there's something there that is causing the shadow. Again, that would be something if we were actually in charge of doing scientific experiments and get all this funding like the other scientists do. We would be able to test some of these things by putting something up in the sky there and seeing if the sun went straight across from it causes a shadow on whatever we put up there.
Right.
Of course, that'll never be done now, but
Yeah, and what makes me wonder, like Eric Dubay is obviously a big proponent of the fact that the moon is transparent at times, that you can see stars through it. I've listened to that argument, and I have to wonder, people say that they've seen stars through it, but what is it that they're actually seeing? I think if you look at, some of these close-ups of the moon, there appear to be extremely bright crystalline type structures on it, that I wonder if those are the things that could be mistaken for seeing a star through the moon, because it just seems so unlikely that it appears so solid, especially so close up, that it would allow the light from a distant star to actually pass through it. And I'm wondering if it isn't actually something within the moon itself that people are just mistaking for stars.
Well, and I've thought about that. I've thought about there's a possibility that the stars may be closer than the moon, which sounds crazy, but you can't assume anything. But then you've also got the argument that let's see. Oh, how you can see the sky if it's a half moon like this, and you can see the sky through the moon or whatever. All you're seeing is the blue sky refracting, and then the light bouncing off the moon is, the sky isn't refracting, and so it's sort of an optical illusion. You're not actually seeing the sky behind the moon. You're just seeing the atmosphere refracting.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a very good explanation for the daytime, when you see the blue seemingly through the moon. I think you're absolutely right in that assumption. So, well, I'll tell you, one other thing I wanted to say also about, Mark Sargent, and I understand how, Jaron, you were saying that it's possible that they found out they were wrong, in trying to discredit religion. But, if you remember what Mark Sargent said, and this always stuck with me in one of his Clues videos, is that the church, upon finding out the earth is truly flat, if it wasn't engineered this way, then the reaction is pretty predictable, in that the church would come back and say, oh, well, we knew all along that it was like this. And he says, and there's nobody that screams louder than the church about stuff like this. So they could come out and say, yeah, we knew all along about this. And then that would, kind of bring a lot of people back to, religion, except unfortunately it would be the canned religion that is so badly mistranslated and misrepresented. So, to me, they've got both sides of the coin covered. They've got, the science side, which gives credibility to NASA, God knows how, but it does. And if that turns out to be wrong, then, the church can always fall back on, hey, we were right all along. So it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation.
Well, that's why, I tried to be a different voice in that, because I don't think you have to subscribe to one or the other, and I don't. And I wanted to be that middle voice to let people know that it's okay, that we don't have to then assume, because the church is lying if they say we knew all along. They got lucky that their book was right. They absolutely caved into science and believed everything that science told them. In fact, they put a observatory on top of their Vatican and look out that telescope, and they've actually were behind the actual science starting, right? If you look at it, these were all Catholics, from Sir Isaac Newton, who was a Freemason, Sir Isaac, knighted, and so these guys are all one and the same. So I do understand what you're saying when you say they've got their hand in both pots, but I don't think that means that we let them win just because they hold the book up and say, yes, the book was right, it was written, we knew it all along. And it's like, no, you're lying. The people back when they wrote it believed that the earth was flat, and it turns out that they were right.
They couldn't
went against it.
they couldn't do that because you're co-conspirators.
Well, it's like every time they tried to prove the Earth as a sphere, they disregard evidence that doesn't jive with their model, and they're always trying to prove things like gravity and prove things like, but all their failed experiments, add up to really empirical evidence that it's not a spinning sphere. So, yeah.
And that's the thing. What I was saying is that the tests themselves will never give us the answer. The answers come from humans, coming up with the reasons why or what this proves. And so all they do is, if you go into an experiment with the idea of the Earth has to be a ball and I can't attribute anything to anything supernatural like God, well, every result is going to be squeezed into their model. So that's what we see when gravity doesn't jive with what they see in the universe. They say, oh, well, there's dark matter and there's dark energy, and we've never observed them, but they must be there, because if they're not, then everything we've always said is wrong. Well,
Right.
that's the truth.
It's so funny.
Well, do you believe that? Well, I'm trying to figure out how they can say because it's a ball, God's not involved in it. I mean,
Well,
it gets,
if you look at the page 1 of Genesis, it basically describes how God created the world, and in my opinion, part of the whole agenda, which has definitely been a Freemasonic sort of occult agenda, is to discredit the Bible, or at least scientists don't feel really comfortable thinking of there being a creator, and so they basically construct this model that removes God or disproves God right on page 1 of the Bible. That's the way I see it.
well, you know what they really do? They just stop. They say, okay, the planet is a ball. It's held up with gravity, and then they leave it there.
Nothing to see here, folks.
they don't say that what's holding it up or where it came from or whatever.
Well, they try. That's what the thing is that they say the Big Bang was an incident that happened at a very dense point in nothingness, because it wasn't even in space, and then it gave birth to all this matter and all this energy, and on top of that it came with laws of physics and order and structure, and then they say that they'll never venture to, they still will say at that point, why not say, well, at that point, you know what, it could be a creator. I don't see the problem in that. I mean, if you ever just listen to Richard Dawkins talk, the guy is insane. He's insane with this hate, this inbred hate for the God. And my problem with it is he hates the Christian God. And I wish that people understood that better. And he even doesn't understand it. It's like, just because humans have taught us who they think God is doesn't mean that's who God is. You can have your own opinion of who God is. And I'll be the first one to say the Catholic Church and the Christian Church and the Islamists, and I believe they're all very wrong about who God is. I personally believe they're very wrong, and the problem with it all is that everybody wants to be told the answer. And to me, any God that would reveal himself and show himself to all of us would just become an idol. People would start wearing necklaces of that God, and they would start, and that's the whole point. You're not supposed to do that. And to me, any God that's small enough that we would see and understand and be able to investigate isn't a God I would worship. So
all they do is they go as far as they can to try to explain it, and then they stop. But if they continue, it leads to a source.
It will lead to God. I mean, absolutely.
So the Big Bang, you can say, oh, that's accurate. Hypothetically, you could say, oh, that's accurate, but something had to create the Big Bang.
Right.
I mean, they just stop at the Big Bang, and the Big Bang is crazy too. when you really think about it.
Every effect has a cause, right? I mean, we know that anything that happens, there was a reason for it happening. But they'll admit that in every aspect. But when it gets to the point where they have to get into the supernatural, rather than just, I mean, imagine if science would have just said, we don't deal with anything supernatural. We study everything up until that point, and we stop there. The difference is science has taken the next step with people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and these guys who want to get up and say, the idea of a creator or a God is ludicrous. And that's where I lose touch with them, is I understand that they believe that the God of the Bible is ludicrous. That's fine. If you believe that, that's fine. But if somebody else believes that and they're being a good person, leave them the hell alone. I mean, I don't understand why we need to get into people's faces about it and make channels like the Armored Skeptic, who just goes to different Christian channels and just bashes on them. I mean, do we jump on the bus, the short bus, and yell at people because they can't do algebra?
Right. I think it's just
Is that impressive?
I think it's two separate sciences that are not clearly defined. There's the scientific method, and then there's dogmatic science. And they're not the same if you really think about it. Who has come behind NASA, for example, and did a peer review? There is no peer review for NASA.
Right.
So if there's no peer review, it's not scientific.
It's exactly pseudoscience. If you can't demonstrate something, then it's pseudoscience. And if only NASA can demonstrate something, then, we can't verify it. So technically, it's pseudoscience.
And that's where we get the ball Earth. There is no way to measure it. Yes, we understand that math worked out on paper can prove that it is a possibility. That's great. Your math is fantastic. Now let's apply that to real life. Oh, well, to show you, I have to show you on paper. No, grab a tape measure like we use for every other aspect of our lives to measure things and show me that it's curved. Well, they can't because it's not. And this is where the conundrum becomes, how do we go about this next step? Because the sad part is the truth requires a complete dismantling of everything that everyone believes. And it's unfortunate, but it's not my fault. I don't know how else to put it. I didn't lie to anybody.
That sounds consistent with enlightenment, known in Eastern philosophies.
What do you mean by that? Explain.
Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism all talk about enlightenment as unveiling all of the lies that have been casted upon you throughout your lives and finding the truth.
Yes.
I find that I think maybe it's a little bit of everything meshed together, and my idea for the Big Bang, whatever created that would be consciousness becoming aware of itself, is an idea that I've pondered about a lot. But we don't necessarily even know what we can define as consciousness or self and such.
Yeah, I think that's another issue is people like to give God human qualities, and even I do it when I say he, and it's just an easier way for me to describe it, but I certainly do not think of God in any way as being a human being or a entity like that. I almost think more along what you're saying. It's the when they say God is the word, right? It's that vibration, it's that realization of self, and then it's multiplied out countless times. I mean, there's however many billion of us there are now, is just a reoccurring of that consciousness being born again, born again, born again. And I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't think that I will come back and ever remember myself. But maybe we do come back as just another part of that infinite spark. And where I see the end is, I've described it before like a room with a light on. And no matter where you go in that bedroom, you will always see the light. Even if you go in the corner of the closet, that light is still there. So I believe those are the people that are part of the will of God, if you will, and are trying to do good by the world and learning as they go through life and trying to make people's lives better. But I believe there's some people in this world who have at some point shut off the light in the room. And at that point, I'm not even sure it's possible to turn it back on. You might be lost. You might not know where the light switch even is. At that point, you don't even remember there being a light. And that's who we're going against. Is there's a bunch of people in this world that, and when I came out with my first video, my biggest question is, how many people are out there who are wandering through the closet right now and who remember the light but don't know how to get back to it or want to get back to it? And the only reason I've kept doing this is because as I made videos, people were emailing me saying, wow, this is what I needed. I've remembered the Creator. I mean, my wife and I, the most touching emails that I've gotten, and I've had 50 from people saying they were atheists until they started watching this flat Earth concept from Mark Sargent or Eric Dubay or myself and Morgile, and that is huge for me, because maybe that's the thing that people were missing, and that's the reason I can look at it and say the ball turned people away from God. I don't even know how it happened, but it worked for me too, because when I had questions growing up, the other side of the coin, which was science, led me to believe, it is possible that there is no creator. And the more I looked into science, the more I kind of fell for it. Like, Oh, evolution. Okay, that makes sense. It's proven. Okay, well, it's scientific. It must have gone through the scientific method. Oh, they know the age of the Earth? Wow, that's impressive. 4.54 billion years? Okay, well, the Bible certainly looks like a joke to me then. And then you
Right.
slowly start to fall into that trap of, well, man knows everything. We know the way this entire universe operates. We know every bit of gravity on every different planet. And as you grow up, you realize that's horseshit. There's no
The
possible
great
way they know that.
deception.
Yeah,
Yep.
The greatest deception of all time.
Right. It's delusion. It's delusion that's promoted that pulls you out of that light that you're referring to.
right. And that's where, I mean, I got pretty close. I can't imagine even ever getting to the point that I would have turned the switch off, but I would have called myself an atheist for about a year. And so I was really in the in the corner of that closet, and luckily I didn't go too far because I could see where people go too far, especially when you're like Richard Dawkins or somebody who is getting up and just slamming it on a daily basis. I mean,
Well,
he'll never admit that he's wrong. At this point, he's gone too far.
well, I mean, in defense, religion makes it easy for people to become. When I say religion, the dogma that's out there makes it easy for one to become atheist.
I agree with you. I would agree with you.
Yep.
So it's like, especially with these angelicals and snake handlers, and I mean, they have really flipped religion away from what it truly is.
You know, I'm
So
so happy that you said that because I think it's the one thing that people miss. And the emails that I get, I don't get a lot of emails from people who, it's the ball, you idiot. Those are mostly comments. But the emails I get where people have a problem with me are always the religious. And I mean, I had one girl tell me, Jesus Christ is the Savior. You need to worship Him and bow down to Him. And I'm 200% sure that He is God that walked on earth. And I mean, for somebody to say that, I wrote back and said, I'm 200% sure He wasn't. So now what? Like, where are we going to go from there? Now we're both 200% sure of something.
Yeah.
But to me, what you said was so key right there, though. I mean, people need to see Joel Osteen. I mean, these guys are ruining it for everyone. I mean, just when you see that, those people are not giving to the homeless. They're not helping the sick and the poor. They're living in an $11 million house, raking in $600,000 a weekend.
Yep.
Right.
Hey, Jaron.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt the
Go ahead.
religious discussion here, but if you look at the screen, I want you guys to look at the clouds on the live feed here. It looks like the clouds are almost all the way up to the ISS.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is a unique view here. This is one I don't believe we've seen before, and I'm just in amazement of what I'm seeing here.
It looks like a conveyor belt.
Yeah, it really does. But I mean, look how high the clouds are on the right side. I mean, geez, you could almost reach down and scoop some up. They're so close.
That's actually 249 miles exactly.
Yeah, sure
Giant
it is.
clouds. Yeah, really.
So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. But one thing that I kind of wanted to throw into the mix when you guys were talking about this is my biggest problem with who or what God is the way that God is anthropomorphized, and everybody gives him these human characteristics, and God is nothing but pure absolute consciousness and love. It is everything, in my opinion. Everything around us, everything including what we perceive as good, bad, indifferent, nothing, everything. There is nothing that is not God and everything that is God. And it's not a person, and it's not a person that has ego or anything, any of the characteristics that humans have. We may have been created in the image of God, but I think the God that the Bible refers to when it talks about let us create man in our image, which I believe is Genesis 1:26, is talking about possibly an extraterrestrial progenitor. But as far as the God of all things, of all creation, of all consciousness, the ever-giving God, I think honestly, to try and endow this entity or whatever it is with human characteristics, is largely degrading to the pure love and pure consciousness that it actually is.
And I think that's where the problem is with Christianity that I have personally, is just simply that they've they put human attributes to something that I think is preposterous for them to do that, to pretend like you know a God that no one's ever seen and that you know his qualities and he's a jealous God, and they say you have to be afraid of God. Oh, all these attributes that they give. I mean, first of all, would a God need worship?
No.
The definition of God is they have everything. It's everything that there is. So that God would not demand worship. And the idea that they say, well, this God gave you free will. Well, thank you, but it comes with a little caveat that if I use it for anything other than what he wants, I burn for all eternity for 80 years in life. I don't get an 80-year prison sentence. I get an eternity prison sentence. And they go around saying that is the truth. And I'll say it again. I've said it 1,000 times. If that's the truth, I am choosing not to worship that God. If he gave me free will, then I'm using my free will to say, I don't believe that that particular God deserves my adoration because I don't agree with his morals. So that's where I leave it, and people go from that and they say call me every name in the book you want. It doesn't mean I'm not a believer. I just don't assign those particular traits to God. I do not believe they say he knows all things. He knows the end of then he created people knowing that they would turn and go to hell for all eternity and still let them be created. I'm sorry, that's pretty messed up. But people will go on and on about, well, it's in the book, so it's true. Okay, well, I'm just saying that I don't particularly agree with that idea. So that's just me, and each person is free to believe whatever they want, and I don't even mind if you do worship that God as long as you don't bring that kind of judgment into the lives that we have. I mean, if you rob a liquor store, I do not think that you should then be given life in prison. That's just my morals. I don't believe that if one person in a town is being really reckless and doing a lot of bad things, that you should flood the whole town. That's just my morals. That's not anything other than that. And so I make the decisions I do in life based on my own morality, but I'm not stupid enough to think that my morality comes from anything other than something inside me, and I believe that something inside me is God.
Right.
So
I totally agree. I'm really into consciousness, and when I say consciousness, I mean awareness. I mean aliveness, and I mean we really put it into perspective. What beats your heart? How does your cells regenerate? Is it your thoughts? Is it your mind? There is a higher power
absolutely.
that gives you life, and I call that thing that I guess the average person will call God, I call that consciousness,
Yes.
and
Or
I mean,
source.
or source, because the word God has been so, uh, uh, um,
It's been beat to death. I mean,
yes, it's been so misconstrued and so, I mean, they fought wars over this. I mean, it's crazy when we're all linked to the source. Even, and you brought up a very valid point. You said even the people we disagree with, the people that came up with the globe model,
yeah, they
they
are other selves.
they are of the source,
Yes.
Connect to
and
them.
the bigger picture is we're not here to all agree with each other. We're here to all love each other. And that love is not necessarily, I have to think the way that you think and I have to do things the way you do them. I just need to recognize that you are of the source as well. And I think that's how we solve all the problems on our earth. We respect each other and we see each other as of God or of
Right.
the source.
You say it so perfectly, because if the scientific world understood that, I'm sorry, I don't see a ball, I don't feel a ball, I don't feel spinning, I don't see any curvature, and to me, the Earth is flat. And that should be allowed to be my truth, because why would you ever believe something that you can't prove to yourself?
Right.
They expect us to all just say, you're right, I'm giving you my belief, and that's the thing that none of us believe in. In fact, they don't believe in belief, so they say. But they don't understand that that's all that they're doing is believing one model over the other. We're choosing to believe another, and I feel so strongly about that it is your right to believe whatever the hell you want. I believe that wholeheartedly. If you want to believe you live on a triangle, I don't care. You live on a triangle. But you cannot then go teach my child at school that he lives on a triangle, because that's up to him to decide. And what we're doing in schools is telling kids they live on a ball and that NASA's going to Mars and there's a robot there that's collecting dirt samples and sending pictures, and that's all bullshit, because I can't walk out of my house and get Wi-Fi, yet this thing 80 million miles away is just sending pictures through Wi-Fi or something. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, if we lived on a triangle, that would probably work as a lot better antenna, and our Wi-Fi would be better.
Well, then we live on a Wi-Fi triangle then.
There you go.
One thing I got to say, guys, real quick is, and this is just what I believe, but I believe that we were put here for one reason at least, and that is to be stewards of the earth, which is very special. And it's almost like by giving our will over to governments and to corporations that are, for all intents and purposes, anti-human and anti-God, they're basically
pro-profit.
destroying this world, which is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that needs to stop. If you look at the what do they call that, mining of the mountains, strip mining of the mountains, where they're just demolishing entire ranges of very beautiful, pristine mountains. It's just awful what they're doing all over the place.
Look at the oil things they're doing. I mean, you know what you brought up there, Morgile, is something interesting to me, because if you're talking about my progression through life and where I feel comfortable with myself, is I've kind of gotten to the point where I believe that the rest of my life I will easily operate in God's will. That I will no longer do things bad to people or ever take from someone or ever intentionally hurt someone. Like, I've gotten to that point. And so you might think I'd be like, okay, finally I'm settled with myself. Well, now my biggest fear is my representatives, who I've agreed to represent me, are bombing and killing people. And I'm afraid that I'm going to be held responsible for that. How could I not be if I know it's happening, I see it happening, and I refuse to do anything? And luckily, the thing that I believe is we just need numbers. I can't go and stop it myself, but enough of us who all see that happening, we can stop it. And then I think when that happens, well, then like you said, the world will be kind of like I say, heaven on earth. But I mean, you said it perfect, Morgan, when you said the world has everything we could ever want. It's so amazing. Every food, every trees to build houses for every person that lives here, and everybody eats, and everybody has clothing, and everybody's happy. It's not like it's a pipe dream. It is actually possible. It's just we have people at the top who believe something different, which is we need to be controlled like sheep and cattle, and they are the smart ones, so they get all the power and all the money and all the riches, and we have kind of agreed. How have we not?
Yeah, we're born into it. Yeah.
If I can, I'm actually trying to get this I'm trying to spread our numbers more and more, like you were talking about, because I believe the same, is that all we really need is people to shift their perspective and understand that this model is faulty, or at least it's run its course. But I'm doing a persuasive speech, particularly on this subject, and I'm wondering, like, out of an opinion based on everybody that's been doing all of this intensive research, what would be the best things to bring up in a short 5-minute speech about it?
Dude.
Yeah, anyone? I mean, there's a million things. One thing, if you've not read Zetetic Astronomy, there's a lot of good proofs in there. The lack of curvature, that's pretty easily proved by lighthouses being visible from over 60 miles away when they should be, a couple thousand feet beneath the horizon. The North Star Polaris being visible from as far south as Capricorn would be impossible on a ball. One that I like to use, but then you have to get into a little bit more further debate, is east to west flight times being identical in duration to west to east flight times. Those three things right there sort of disprove any sphericity, and they also disprove any sort of motion. Those are three that I always like to use. Jaron?
Yeah, I think those are awesome. The best one that I've found just recently is the ocean. I think it was really confusing me before, and I had a hard time understanding exactly what was happening there. And I think I've realized it, and the best way I would describe it is, again, setting up hurdles and just showing that from the eye level of the first hurdle, each hurdle after that is going to drop below it. And that's all that the boats are doing. So it looks as if they are going, the farthest hurdle is going to look like it drops off. You're not going to see it anymore. But that's just because your eyes only see the front hurdle, and that's like the equivalent of the front section of ocean. You can't see every section of ocean all the way down across the earth, and that's what these people, the GLOBEBUSTERS, keep wanting to say, is you would be able to see for infinity, which is just the biggest, most ridiculous joke I've ever heard. The only reason they get away with saying that is because they also believe we can look into the sky and see 35 trillion miles away or 64 quintillion miles away at stars. You can't. It's impossible to even fathom that distance, let alone to see it. And that just tells me that they don't understand that the way your eyes work, that eventually that pinches off. The sky meets the ground pretty much at the same distance all around you, and it's only about 5 miles. And beyond that, you can see something taller like a boat. You can see it kind of drifting off, or the sun. It's going to go and drift off into the outskirts. But the water to me is so obvious now, especially when you think of the whole entire ocean as being reflected. It's a mirage. To us, it looks like waves. It's way out there, but it's a mirage. What is it reflecting? The sky. What's behind it? The sky. So anywhere where you think that that water ends is probably incorrect, because everything beyond that point is going to be reflecting the sky, which is the same exact color of what's behind that. So when we see boats kind of disappear, you have no idea what's going on over there. When people say, well, you can't see the buildings all the time in Chicago from Michigan. Well, of course you can't, because it takes a certain conditions. It has to be, for instance, when we see those pictures taken, are they ever at 12 noon in a beautiful day? Absolutely not. You will not see those buildings at 12 noon. The reason why is because the sun is right on top of that water, which means at a certain distance, everything else is being reflected. And so all you see is the reflection, which is the same color as the sky, which replaces the building. So all of a sudden you look out there and say, there's no buildings. So it has to be perfect atmospheric conditions. It needs to be towards the evening or in the early morning to where you can look out there. There's no reflection of the sun, and that's when you see, voila, there's the buildings. And do they look to be a little bit underwater, meaning the bottom portion of the buildings are still covered? Yeah, because why? Because you only see the top portion, the first hurdle. You only see that first stretch of ocean. You don't get to see all the ocean behind that would lead to the bottom of those buildings. Your top portion is covering those buildings. And again, you can play with perspective. Take a night and just have fun with different distances and different items in your camera and zooming in, and the difference between moving the camera closer or further away. There's all these different things that happen with our eyes that will help you explain what's going on around you. And but I would just say that the ocean is a huge one for me. Is it's certainly not a ball, which would start at your feet. You would see it go off in the distance and drop. Even if they say you wouldn't be able to see the curve, you would still see it going at your feet level for as far as your eye could see. There would be no reason for it to rise up to your eye level. The only reason that it rises up is because it's an infinite plane. It will never end. Maybe it does possibly end. When I say that, I've never been to Antarctica. Maybe when you get there, all of a sudden your horizon isn't doing the same thing anymore, and you would have to make a new decision at that point. But for me, everything I've ever seen rises to my eye level because it's infinite.
Yeah, and to me, Darren, that's one of the biggest proofs ever of flat Earth, just because of that simple phenomenon itself. I don't care what other model you look at, nothing else does that. So for me, even though it seems so obvious and so often repeated, to me it is absolutely the strongest proof that we have of this, the flatness of our Earth.
Well, and that's regardless of altitude too. That's even 40 miles up the horizon raises to the eye level, so that totally disproves any
Right.
sort of sphericity. Yeah.
And who's the one person that tells us that at a certain height it does become spherical? NASA.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who get to see that. And that's why we're saying the pictures to us don't quite look legit. So show us some legit pictures. It's 2015. We have 4K and 8K video that is almost surreal. It's almost too real. And we get what looks like grainy, crappy video footage. And they have enough money, believe me. And if I was in charge of NASA, that'd be the first thing I'd do is make the people who give me money happy. Not, not just keep doing whatever the hell we want. No, we decided. I mean, have you heard their latest thing that they're going to capture an asteroid? And it's like, what are you talking about? It's like ridiculous.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, me too.
We need Bruce Willis.
What stands out to me is the airplane flight. If you're on a ball and you're in an airplane, at some point you will be upside down. The whole perspective of the flight, it doesn't make sense to me.
And it doesn't make sense to you because you live in reality where there is no. Some people are upside down, some people aren't. Well, then the people who are upside down are going to have a pretty bad headache. But just to explain it away with, well, it's to each person's perspective. It's like, great, if you want to live in Fantasyland, you can live in Fantasyland. I live in reality where I take everyone else's perspective into consideration. So if somebody across the world from me, it's nighttime there, and they're right side up, and I'm on this side of the world, and it's daytime here, and I'm right side up, well, then the Earth is flat. End of story. I mean, yeah, if they had some sort of video footage or way to measure and show me this pulling to the center of a ball, well, it just makes no sense. Why aren't we pulled to the center of the sun? If that's the way things work, how could it? Now they give gravity these godlike qualities, and that it has the ability to choose and decide. And well, we'll keep the moon right about here, and and the Earth can go around, and we have an eccentric orbit, so it's going to go way out here, but then it's going to come close on this route. It's just ridiculous.
Well, even with gravity, you're still upside down.
Right? One thing I've been thinking about too, and I think you mentioned this before too, Jaron, but like during the daytime, let's say the Earth is traveling its path around the sun. Well, okay, in the daytime, it should be pushing up against your feet, but then at nighttime, the Earth should be racing away from up against your feet. So you'd think you'd weigh a little bit more or less during the day or night, depending on.
Well, it's like a tumble, right? It's
right.
like a tumbling motion. Or how would you not feel the difference between walking in the direction that the Earth is spinning and then turning around and walking the other direction? You would definitely feel a difference.
If you've been on a train, you'll definitely know that it's easier to sprint towards the rear. Wait a minute, towards the rear of the train when it's moving than it is to sprint towards the front of it when it's moving.
No, it's
forward.
Easier to sprint to the front.
No, when it's moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's easier to sprint towards the back because the train's coming towards you. You feel like you're running twice as fast. Yeah, you feel like you're running twice as fast when you're going in the opposite direction as a train. So yeah, you'd think if the face of the Earth was spinning over 700 feet per second, that if you were running west, you'd be a lot swifter than running east.
Right.
Relative to the ground below you, so you'd think.
Yeah, and these are all the things everything that makes sense to us, and we say, or so you'd think. Well, that, in order to take that over and say, no, what you think is wrong, here's the truth, there better be a hell of a lot of evidence for it. And that's not what we get. We get told what you think is wrong because what we say is right. And you're like, well, where's the evidence? Well, it's this little test and this. Well, we put a pendulum up at the North Pole and it rotates this way. Like, that's the proof? There could be a million reasons for that. Like, that's not proof of anything.
I've had people use the argument, well, when you shout to the west, it doesn't travel further than if you shout to the east, now does it? And I'm like, well, what are you trying to prove? You're talking about the Doppler effect, right? And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't because the Earth is stationary. And they're like, wait a minute, that makes a lot of sense.
Imagine that, huh?
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah, everything that they just don't, and I understand why, because it was taught. And that's what I think maybe we can try and push a little bit more, is that people think flat earthers are dumb because they were taught flat earthers are dumb. That's the only reason to think that. Otherwise, you're just, when we're giving all this evidence of reasons we think it and the proof that we have and the measurements that show it, to keep coming back with, well, you guys are dumb, it's because you were taught that. So you feel like you're in a a higher position, and you're able to tell people that they're dumb because you've been given the almighty truth. But you've never discovered that on your own. You've just been told that.
Yep, you
Right.
just parrot it like it's for real or something. It's just all fabricated stuff. And you're right. A lot of flat earthers are very intelligent because of the fact that they don't follow along with the company line, and they try to think for themselves, or they do think for themselves, and they, even if their conclusions are incorrect, the bottom line is that they're in there, they're considering it, they're thinking about it. They're not just saying, well, my science teacher told me this, so that's got to be true because I have no power in this world.
Right.
And that's one of the other things that, we've been stripped of our power. We're born into this world, and we look around and we think that we have absolutely no power whatsoever to change anything. And the reality is, and history has proven over and over and over again, that it's a small group of people or even a single individual that can make the most profound changes in all of humanity. And so anybody that follows the line or the belief that we as individuals have no power whatsoever is, unfortunately well indoctrinated.
Right. Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
When you deal with a dumb person, it's pretty easy to prove that they're dumb. It's very hard to disprove what we're talking about. I mean, it's hard as hell, and it's so hard that they ignore us, But if we were truly dumb, they would just blow us out of the water, and we would die a horrible death. But they can't do that because they got to show proof to show that we're dumb.
Or you leave dumb people alone.
Right.
I mean, to me, it just seems like if somebody was out screaming that tennis balls were gods, well, I'm not going to go and go to that person's channel and spend all day telling them they're an idiot. In fact, I've seen people where if you kind of follow them around, you'll see like their day was spent going to different flat Earth videos and saying how dumb those people are. And it's like so obvious to me is if those people are, what are you doing going to watch their videos? It's because you have doubts in your mind. And the only way you can feel better at night and sleep is to say those people are such idiots and I'm smart. Well, I mean, I'll tell you right now, in the world standards, absolutely, I'm an idiot. I'm as stupid as a bag of hay. But and that's true. I mean, by the world standards, that's what anybody's going to say. But to me, I know myself that if given the evidence, I will always side with the truth. So the fact that I'm not able to say that the Earth is a ball, I just wish people saw that as an attribute rather than a detriment. The attribute being that if you show me evidence that we're on a ball, I'm going to tomorrow. I would, and people always, Jerry, that Zibrain, did you hear him? What is his name?
Zipbrain, yeah.
Yeah, his recent video where he basically said that Ricky Hammond's had his day with us or something.
I don't know about that. I don't know.
No.
Yeah,
it was funny. Basically saying that Ricky Hammond's did a great job and that we were idiots and don't understand the truth of the concave Earth. But what he doesn't understand.
I was going to say who's Ricky Hammond's, but yeah, I remember now. Never mind.
Right, and my whole thing about that is if any sufficient proof was presented for anyone to think and that I would just ignore it to go the wrong direction is insane. It's like all I want is the truth. It's unfortunate that I have to go through getting beat over the head every day to get there. But the alternative is to just become another mindless drone like they are. Sorry. I'm not willing to just accept people's word when, if it's true, show me.
Yeah,
NASA, show me.
I'd rather speculate about stuff and be dead wrong about it than to just accept things, sight unseen.
Absolutely. I would rather, and if I want to say that to me, I don't know whether the moon or the sun is further away. Yeah, are 6 billion people going to laugh at me? Absolutely, because they've been told that one is 93 million miles and one is only 250,000 miles. But they don't know. Like my brother. I mean, they just don't know. And so to me, I'd rather speculate and try different models. I would stop at the point where someone said, here's the proof that these things are true. Well, then why would I keep speculating on things that I have now been given proof that it resonates with me, that I understand and accept? If I don't understand or accept it, then I'm going against my own self to believe anything that doesn't jive with me. And for 35 years, I did. I looked at the world and just, I guess we're spinning, okay, and allowed someone else's interpretation to be my reality, and I won't spend another day of my life doing that. I don't think we're spinning, and until somebody shows me some sort of evidence for it, I'm standing completely still. The earth is still. The earth is flat. The sun is close. I mean, those things are my reality, and if those guys want to live in ball land, they can live in ball land, but it's a religion, so don't teach it in schools, or at least teach other options and let kids come to their own conclusion, or else we're going to have a bunch of testicles running the earth in 50 years.
Right. But they'll never do that though, Jaron, because I mean it's not like this is an accident. This is a full-blown agenda.
Absolutely.
To
At
disconnect
this point it is,
us. Oh, absolutely it is. And and I
Cognitive
don't
dissonance. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that, it has been all along, because I mean, one of the first things you have to do to enslave people is to, disconnect them and make them think that there's nothing special about them, just like they try to do, and that we're just some random crazy occurrence. And I think the reason that they chose the ball model, other than the fact that it probably worked a little bit better than a cube, is because is because that it sets us out in the middle of space, floating aimlessly, amongst billions of light years worth of other planetoids, stars, structures, planets, whatever, and it really makes us completely insignificant and appear like everything was just completely accidental. But even if that was true, to look at the creation and to look at the stars and the wonder of all that, I mean, how could somebody look at that and still not see intelligent design, still not see that there was absolute consciousness and thought and intelligent structure to what we're seeing around us? So even if the ball Earth was true, it would not tend to make me think that everything around us is not created and intelligently designed.
Well, the one thing is the sun being a star. I mean, if that's true, then you say, wait, so the sun that is everything that we live off of, is one of an average, and then there's 300 billion other ones. To me, that kind of would tend to make me feel insignificant, because I would say, well, why would those other suns be created? What are they there for? Why would you waste all this space? Well, the truth is to me that there is no wasted space.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Mm-hmm.
How the hell do they come up with these numbers? Like 300 billion stars, and I mean, do they actually physically count these things?
They count like a small section, so they say. So let's say the camera is looking at a 4x4 section, and then they figure out, well, there's 700 of those 4x4 sections in a complete circle, and they say they count what's in that little 4x4 square and multiply it out, but it's just insane. The distances alone should scream there's a problem here, and it just so happens that the stars don't change their relative positions, and they set them at a distance where they can get away with saying that they don't. But I mean, if you just look at the fact that we go 586,000 miles in 1 year, that's how far the Earth travels, and during that time the sun itself is also going 584,000 miles an hour through space, but yet every single year the stars reset where they started. That's the kind of thing where it is absolute proof that the Earth does not move.
100% proof.
100% proof. And if you want to say anything, tell about that, because there is now. If you go ask a scientist or you go ask one of these guys, they're going to tell you that there's 0.0003% of parallax change in the stars, and in 10,000 years the North Star will be a little bit over. That's all great and dandy, but none of us can prove that. That's just been something that's part of their foundation and something they believe in. It's not your or my truth. show me that. They can't
Well, I
show
think
that.
another big one to point out, Jaron, and I've often credited you with pointing this out first because you were the first person I've known to mention this, but you can point out that the stars that are visible during the summertime should be totally invisible everywhere on Earth for the entire winter. And the same thing goes with spring and autumn, just simply because of how the solar system is set up, supposedly, and we simply can't study the stars during the daytime. So you should never ever be able to see any of the same stars during summer versus winter, no matter where you are on Earth. So that's another big 100% proof that the heliocentric model is definitely wrong.
Yep. Absolutely agree.
I think another big one for me is just to go back to that, the sun rising and setting at everybody's feet. It only makes sense if the Earth is flat. If you're talking about a ball, picture a tennis ball covered with people all over it. So now it's covered with people in every area of that tennis ball. And then spin the tennis ball and tell me that a sun in the distance would rise and set to everybody's feet. How? It's a ball. Some people would see the sun coming around the right side. It would come around the side of their perception. It would not always come from the feet or always go down at your feet. That means the Earth's flat. It can't be a ball. You have two people who see the sunrise at the exact same time, but one of them might be at the top of the globe and the other person's at the bottom. And I don't mean exactly the top and the bottom. Move them over a little bit. So say North America and South America. When the sun is rising for both those people, they are antipode each other, yet the sun rises to both of their feet. That's not the way it would work. It would have to come around the side to somebody or pop up over their shoulder, or it would never just always rise from your feet. It's those are the kind of things that to me are baffling, that we still are questioning when we understand how reality works. And when you talk about a ball, sometimes I get so confused because it can't exist. We know what water does when it's tipped or tilted, or so you can't have an ocean full of bulgy water. And sure, you can say that there's something called gravity that holds it to the surface, but we don't see it, and it can't be shown or measured other than by one group, NASA, who is Masonic at their core, and they're the gatekeepers.
Wow.
We also talk about that we can measure like the expansion of the universe and how quickly that is, and how long it would take us to get there theoretically through one of these new spaceships they're talking about, being able to harness the energy of a exploding star and to be able to move to the edge of the universe in an instant of some sort. And it's like, I have no idea how they can even fathom these kind of conceptions, and let alone sell them as factual evidence.
Well, and I think the reason they get the distance is obviously using the false spherical trigonometry. They get the distance to the sun is 93 million miles, and so in order for the orbit of the Earth to work, we have to be going around just vast distances. So you'd expect to see some sort of change in the parallax of the stars all around you, but they all remain fixed. And so their solution to that is, oh, well then, they must be these huge, just mind-bogglingly vast distances. But when you really dissect it, it doesn't work in their model. I mean, we're able to see the same stars year in and year out. They just go in a circuit and wind up right where they started at the exact same time every year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest. There's the tugboat again.
So what is that anyway?
I have no idea.
I'm on my cell phone. I apologize.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. It's like, that's a new noise for us.
Yeah, we haven't heard that one. No, I think some of those things are awesome proofs, and it really is obvious that even if, let's say, hypothetically, the ball is real, that space is real, Mars is real, all that stuff, what are we doing investigating Mars when we're destroying this planet, and we can't even live on Mars? I mean, it's not conducive to life. It's not conducive to humans. It's like we're going against everything that would be natural anyway. And I had somebody arguing with me on Facebook last night, and I just told him, and this was one thing that you might want to ask, I said, what has NASA done for humanity? And he said, oh, and he must have gone and looked it up and told me something about fuel cells or something, invented hydrogen fuel cells. And I did a quick search on that, and they were discovered in 1885. I said, try again. And he basically, they came up with this medicine that helps people, but they didn't need to do that in space. I said, somebody would have invented that anyway.
What
So
about freeze-dried ice cream?
Right. See, there's a good one. Or Tang.
Tang. I was thinking Tang. What about Velcro?
Yeah, Velcro. Funny video about that, too.
Tang's always better hot than cold, though.
Yeah.
God, did I just say that? I'm sorry.
Poo-tang. Pootie Tang.
Yeah.
So did you uncover anything that they ultimately contributed to humanity, or is it just bogus pictures?
Absolutely not. It's the nothing. CGI graphics and a vision of landing on different planets and what they're made of and how heavy they are. And I love that one test that I gave where, it's like, what is the weight of a neutron star, a teaspoon of neutron star? And it's something like 900 billion pounds. It's like, that's the kind of numbers that they need to explain the universe. Like, oh, that's a neutron star. It must weigh 900 billion pounds because it fits in this mathematical formula here. Well, guess what, guys? That doesn't mean that the star weighs 900 billion pounds. It probably means that you're out of your mind.
That's really heavy, man.
Isn't that, if you took a teaspoon of it, isn't that what they say theoretically would fall through the Earth, through the out the opposite side of the Earth over and over again until it turned the Earth into a piece of Swiss cheese, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right, are we talking about China syndrome or?
Well, think about doing that too. Have you ever thought about that on the ball Earth? Now, picture when we talk about digging to China, at what point would you reorient yourself to be on the correct side of the globe? Because you wouldn't come out the right way. You'd have to flip. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be crazy. Yeah, you have to wonder because you've heard it. I'm sure you've all heard of the movie The China Syndrome, and the first time I ever saw that, it's like, wait a minute. So you're saying that these rods get so hot that if they fall down, they actually keep burning through the earth all the way until what? They pop up out the other side?
It's crazy. It's like what we all just accepted too. Like, isn't it? And maybe I don't remember this correct. Don't they say that if you were to, throw a ball, and let's say we remove ourselves from the Earth's sphere of gravity, and we throw a ball down, that eventually the ball would come and hit me on the head? Don't they say like that's, like it's not like never ending, it would like pop out the other side? Isn't that kind of the conception of space? Because it's curved, right? It's a curvature, so it's basically like a ball.
Yeah. That's how the model of the universe is ultimately described, I believe, is sort of like a spherical expanding ball. They have an infatuation with balls for some reason.
They do, and then they even take that ball, and then they'll say, now there's all these balls, and it's like, you ever seen that image they have? It's like a bunch of balls all over. It's like, I don't even know what they call it. Like the multiverse. There's like we're a tiny ball, and there's a million other balls, and it's just insane because, like you said yesterday, Morgile, when you were talking about the whole idea of theoretical, it's like, can we figure out what the hell's going on Earth first? Let's cure Alzheimer's and then worry about multiverse. Okay, let's get rid of cancer and then we'll worry about what the hell's on Mars. Like, it's so backwards that we would have 30,000 kids dying every day in Africa from starvation or from malaria because they simply are getting stung by mosquitoes or bitten by mosquitoes, and we're out spending 150 billion on, look at our space station and our feed from space.
That doesn't ever hardly work.
Look at the clouds as they go by. Sorry you don't get to see any land, and sorry we only are on for 10 minutes every hour. We have to go on the dark side of the Earth where cameras don't work, as you all know, once you're on the dark side.
Yeah, we never see any night lights anywhere, or lightning or anything, unless, of course, it's one of their canned videos.
Right. In a couple days, I'll have a video for you that'll show you the lights, but I can't do that today.
Yeah.
Give me a day or two, and I'll come out with an epic time lapse of what the lights look like all over the Earth. It is insane.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you see anything out there, by the way, when you went out to look for the ISS?
No, it was cloudy.
Okay.
It's always something.
I know. I haven't been able to photograph it either because the two times I've gotten notices, it was raining and heavy clouds in the sky. But I am going to catch it eventually, and hopefully I can catch something decipherable, I guess, because we know what it isn't, but I'd like to know kind of what it is, if at all possible.
Yeah, me too.
My camera sucks so bad I can't even film my cat inside with all the lights on.
Oh man.
No chance that I'm gonna get any glimpse of that thing on camera.
Oh man, that's too funny.
Can I mention something?
Please.
Sure.
I think this is the second occurrence of a shill attack, and the reason why I want to say this is because I felt like I witnessed firsthand another one. I don't think I was the first one to tell Jaren, of course, that his site was down, but I was just talking to him last night, and by this morning it was gone, and I was very confused. And something identical happened to that when I was looking for Matt Boylan. Of course, you can't really find him on YouTube anymore because of everything that's been going on. So he tried to post a secret. I don't want to say secret. I don't know how to approach this. He started posting videos on Facebook under a fake name called the Wizard of Math Powerland, and there were no views under them until I was basically the first person to watch a couple of them and see that he is still active and trying to spread this kind of information. And within the next day, everything was gone. Not a single video was there, but all the other posts were there.
Wow. Did he drop some of those off with you, Jaren, when he was over at your house a couple weeks ago, or?
He did not. No.
Okay.
Wait a minute. So Matt Boylan, the NASA channel's offline now? I watch his stuff a lot, but it's been a while.
All that's still there. It's just that he doesn't post anything new, like on YouTube at all, or like anything anywhere. But these videos that he was posting on Facebook were like, I think the latest one was a month ago, and then they span out month by month.
Was that when he was trying to have some sort of get-together?
I believe so, and have like his expedition start with a whole bunch of different people, like with all the different theories.
Yeah, he told me about that, and basically, yeah, said Facebook had, on purpose or whatever, taken down some posts that he was making so that nobody would show up at this event. And I'm not sure, because I've heard a lot of rumors about the same thing happening to Eric Dubay lately. I'm not sure if it's because his name is not real or if that's really the case. Seems like, I can't imagine them getting away with that, but again, I could be naive as far as that goes. I would throw a pretty big fit if Facebook just deleted my Facebook account for no reason.
Talking about.
Yeah, I'm just saying, with him, well, you just said his name was the Wizard of Math Power. Well, that's not his real name.
Oh,
so yeah. Facebook has a pretty strict policy as far as that goes, and when I say pretty strict, I don't mean you can't go to Facebook right now and find 1 million people with fake names. But once that person's been reported, Facebook will require proof that that is you, that is your actual name. Facebook is not for people to make, they allow pages, so you can make a page that says the Wizard of Math Powerland, but you can't have that be your account. And I know that when I actually made a Facebook account for Flat Earth, at first my name was Jeranism Truther or something like that. And within a week, my Facebook was down, and it said, please change your name to your real name, or we're going to delete your Facebook. So I had to change it to my real name. And so everything's been fine since then. So when I hear about people losing their Facebooks, I'm usually under the impression that they've either been reported as having a fake name or they are using a fake name. So if we see Eric Dubay's stuff come back up, I'm assuming that means that was his real name. If we don't, then I would assume that means he probably doesn't have an ID under that name or something like that. Same thing with the Wizard of Math Powerland. If that's how he was posting his meeting spots or whatever, I could see that being taken down. So, and in this case, as far as what happened with the GLOBEBUSTERS channel, I'm not sure what kind of attack it was. The information we got from YouTube just basically says that there was severe policy violations, which they actually said several severe policy violations. So to me, they need to explain that. We've never done anything wrong or even been given a warning. So I've asked them, and hopefully they'll respond. And Morgile seems to feel pretty confident, which has given me some confidence that they're going to handle the situation correctly. And we'll be back on the GLOBEBUSTERS channel next week. But who knows? If it is an attack, well, then we probably won't be.
Sometimes it'll take you 10 days to get a human being to respond, and you might have to email them a couple times. But yeah, I think they'll probably do the right thing.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, they did the right thing in my mind with the Climera incident. It did take them about 2 weeks, but they obviously told him that he needed to take it to court because I was challenging the copyright violation because you can't extort somebody, or you can't accuse somebody of extortion and then as soon as they make a video freeing themselves or saying that they're not guilty, then say, "Oh, that's copyright. He copyrighted my information." It's like, no, that's not the way things work. This
Do,
is a news story, news piece. So
do you think it's a severe violation to call Michelle Obama a man?
I think it's severely accurate.
Because honestly, I was wondering today. It's like, wow, maybe that was it. I don't know.
To be
Nah.
honest, if I had to guess, it might have something to do with the Hampstead case.
Yeah, I'd say that's the best bet.
Yeah, and it might just be, again, if what I pretty much know to be a fact, which is that happened, well, the fact that an entire city knows it happened and the police department has squashed it and the judge squashed it and the media has squashed it, well, there's somebody pretty high up that doesn't want it to be discussed anymore. So if somebody found out we were talking about it, maybe they claimed we were promoting kiddie porn, or I mean, who knows? It
It
could
seems
just be
to
a
me, and we
thing like
don't.
that.
Yeah, it seems to me, and we don't have to go into the details on air, but it seems to me, based on what you told me before the show, is that somebody just sort of triggered the automated system to give you that, and once somebody looks into it, they'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, the only thing that was weird is just getting there and seeing suspended channel. You can't even get in it. Like they take your videos down, it's gone. And oh,
Wow.
by the way, I did want to mention. I'm glad that somebody reminded me. But if anybody out there has taped or recorded or whatever, saved any of the last 5 or 6 episodes, and I'm most concerned about the Berwick one that I thought last night's show was good. But maybe there's somebody out there who has been saving the Jeranism at Yahoo.
Pyro Pete, didn't you say in the chat? Was that you that said in the chat that you had just recorded it, or was that somebody else? Oops.
He's
No.
been gone for a while.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again.
He's been gone, or at least muted for some time now.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I do
All right.
see him muted there.
All right. Well,
All right.
somebody said that in the chat that they had just recorded last night's show.
Oh, good.
So they had it, and I can't remember who it was, but I can look at the chat history and find out.
Oh, that'd be awesome. But if
Yep.
if anybody has taped any, we have pretty much everything saved from my channel and then the GLOBEBUSTERS channel from about 3 weeks ago back. But the last 3 weeks we don't have. So that would just be in a worst case scenario that they don't give the channel back. Well, I would like to recover some of those videos and at least put them over on Jeranism and have
Yeah,
a place to be
we
seen.
need to start mirroring those. I think I'm going to start uploading them to my channel or something, or we should make another backup channel or something, because now that this has happened twice
Yeah.
on each one of your channels, I mean, it's obvious somebody's out there gunning for us,
Yeah, and I actually today was like a wake-up call too, that at least when the Climera thing happened, I still had access to the account. I was taken down to 15 minutes and all that stuff that happens. You're removed from the partner, you lose the money thing, and that's all fine. That's all great, but at least I had the videos. So what happened today was
Right.
like a wake-up call to the fact of everything was just gone. And it's like, that's people spend a lot of time on that, and it's just gone. So yeah, I do think we need to mirror it and have backups, and it's just something I haven't done. We did it a little bit, like I said, in the past, but so yeah, if you could do that, Bob, that'd be awesome. Or maybe we could start a page on Jeranism or something.
Definitely. It was Matthew Eugene Rosa, by the way, that said that he recorded it. So
Okay.
that's the guy that has one of them at least, and
That's that's his Facebook name. I mean, that's his YouTube name.
yeah, and he's actually in the chat group right now, and he's also on the chat.jeranism.com under his own name. So
Okay, great.
yeah, so thank you, Matthew. That's awesome.
So awesome. Thank you so much. So we'll go around and just get some final words if you have anything to close out with. Again, give me about 10 minutes after the show and I'll set up the thing. So if you guys want to put your name in again, or anyone listening that wants to be on the show next Tuesday, we don't know what channel we'll be on, but we'll be here. So Michael, any final words or words of advice?
Yeah, sure. I would like to point out that the time lapse of video that I'm not entirely sure who put out, but it's about 25 minutes long. Has some great perspective points of view in there that I don't know how to necessarily point into the correct terminology.
Are you
Like,
talking about the documentary that I posted today that was from Scrawny to Brawny?
oh no, it's
Which one are you
somebody
talking
else. Hold on, I can like get to it right here on my YouTube history in like 20 seconds, not even.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched that what Scrawny to Brawny did, and I was pretty amazed at how they created what seemed to be like a little star, and it was like a
What was
vat of
that?
liquid. I don't know, but I want to look more into that.
I know, I really liked it. I thought it was cool.
Sonoluminescence. I've been looking into that a little bit. It's
Somnoluminescence, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
gosh, where is it? I think it's my perspective or something like that. And he shows how like the tilt that we're talking about being the tilt of the axis of the Earth is actually just how the sun would approach us, and when it hits midday, that's like your perspective line. And then everything that's approaching you will come to you, and everything that's disappearing from you will disappear into the horizon line.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's absolutely right. But it's funny that the angle of tilt that they attribute to the path of the sun is the exact same angle that would cause the sun. Well, perspective, the exact same angle that perspective would cause the sun to travel on that same path. So
Of course.
yeah, it's a little bit of a coincidence.
Hey,
Yeah.
Morgile, would you say that the North Star then is not above the North Pole based on the tilt, the so-called tilt? If the tilt is what's pointing to the North Star, I was thinking that might help us a little bit with the Southern Star issue if actually the stars are offset a little bit to the flat Earth.
Very minutely.
It's really weird. It's almost it's hard to describe because the further and further a star gets away, then it just gets lower and lower towards the ground, according to your perspective.
Right.
And so it really makes it difficult, even though let's just say hypothetically all of the stars are at the same height on the same plane. Down here on Earth, they're going to look to curve like down and around you, but really that's just it's a trick of the eye and how perspective works. If that
Right.
helps make any sense, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was more talking about in your kind of model, would you say that the North Star is directly above the North Pole, or would you say it's offset in some way?
Well, it's definitely directly above the magnetic center because
Okay, that's what I
it
meant.
does sort of wobble a little bit, but it doesn't, I mean, it does sort of create or describe a circle, but not nearly as large a circle as any of the surrounding stars.
Right, exactly.
So it's
Okay.
very close to the magnetic center as far as we can tell, or it's very, very distant, but it doesn't seem to me that the stars are all that much disparate or different in their distances. They're all similarly distant as far as I can tell, but who knows?
Yeah, it just sucks that we can't go to the North Pole and do anything, any kind of research there.
I'm
Or
pretty
the
close
South
to
Pole.
that.
Right.
I've seen some weird stuff with the sun and moon and how like, wow, there was the sun was setting and it had just gone behind a hillside and you could clearly see the moon. It was just like on either side of my town, and not within 10 to 15 minutes, just this fog rolled in, like almost as if on cue, like it was supposed to do that. It was uncanny, and it was covering the entire town within 15 minutes.
Have you ever seen, I don't know if you've watched enough time lapse, you've seen before that the clouds follow the sun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible that they seem to be attracted to it, as if like you said, like it's meant to be, like it needs to follow the sun through and then when it gets over by where it's going to set, it's going to kind of protect it, like a barrier. It's crazy. Have you are you in an area where you have these long nights or long days, or what goes on in your particular city there?
I am on that cusp, actually, like just on the outside of the Arctic Circle, so we get a little bit of both. We get in the summer where it won't set for a few days at a time, and yeah, it's basically around the solstices that it won't set and it won't rise.
So does it do would you describe it as a straight line, or does it kind of do that up and down bob?
Um,
Meaning, like, I guess obviously I'm not thinking you stare at it for 24 hours, but does it get high? Does it get up higher and lower in the sky?
yes.
Right.
Like after watching that perspective video I was trying to talk about, I've been looking at it how it basically does what that's saying is that it peaks out and then it kind of drifts away, and what seems to be it falling. but it's just moving away from my perceptual horizon.
Okay. So, I mean, one of the crazy things to me is the way they talk about what happens in Antarctica is not at all what happens. If you looked up right now on Google, how many, how does the nights work in Antarctica? The first thing that'll come up will be a NASA article saying 6 months of daytime, 6 months of nighttime, and then there'll be a bunch of other sites that say that, and then you'll kind of start to get to the truth, where some people will say it's 4 months, then some people will say it's 3 months, and then you just go look at the webcams that are all over and watch the webcams, and you'll see that at most it's a month and a half or 2 months. And so, again, why are you lying to us unless you're trying to hide something? And what they're hiding is that the North Pole and South Pole are very different, and they wouldn't be in a globe model. They would have to both have the same thing happen to them on different ends of the year, but that's not at all what happens, and we should be able to see that by the fact that one's a giant ice plateau and the other is really water and icebergs. So anyway.
Icebergs, is that Jewish?
That's Goldberg.
Oh, all right. Okay, got
it. So, Michael, anything else, or anybody have any questions for him since he's from Alaska? We can get some good Alaska questions in, or.
No. When was the last time you were in Anchorage? Just out of curiosity, Michael.
Not more than a month and a half ago.
Really? Okay, yeah, I spent a lot of time in Anchorage, and I loved it there. Spent a whole summer up there where the sun never went down, and I can remember clearly at 3 o'clock in the morning outside playing all kinds of games. And it's just Alaska is a whole different kind of place. It's lovely. The only thing you have to watch out for is the mosquitoes. They have really big mosquitoes there, and in fact, they had one that was so big they had one land at Elmendorf Air Force Base, and they had like 55 gallons of fuel in it, I think, before they realized it was a mosquito. So they're pretty sizable, I got to tell you.
Oh boy!
You guys fly a lot of planes around Alaska, right?
Yes. I've been in small bush planes that kind of do like little jumps in, and I've been in other planes and such. I don't necessarily do a lot of flying myself. But yeah, we have to do a lot of flying to like get to any of the villages around in Alaska, because there's not roads to those places.
Right. That's what I was sort of the assumption I was going with. So yeah, you should have a lot of good opportunities to take pictures without using obviously the fisheye lenses of pretty vast distances of relatively flat Earth. I'd like to see some good pics out of Alaska, because it should be a great place. Given the access to airplanes you guys have, it should be a little bit easier than the average Joe.
Oh yes, it definitely is. And on some final words, I would just like to say that this has all been a very surreal experience for me, because I've been listening to you guys for months on end, and now that I'm actually here having this conversation, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm actually here. It's kind of strange, and I want to encourage everybody to continue making these videos, because they're making a difference, and to have this little mishap of having a channel be suspended not to hinder our progress. If anything, it should excel it and show that we have something that is worth saying.
Yes,
Awesome.
very, very well said. And you're right. They wouldn't be doing this if we weren't onto something. Whether it's the Hampstead kids, Flat Earth, Michelle Obama being a man, whatever it is, we're onto something. So, we're just going to stick right with it, and we're not going to let stuff like this get us down. And if so, we'll just keep opening more YouTube accounts, right?
That's the key. Yeah, and I honestly feel like for me that there was a period of time where I felt like that. No, I don't want to say I was integral to the whole thing, but that I was scared that if something happened to my channel or something, that I could hurt the whole thing. And at least that we've gotten over that hump now, to where I know if I disappeared tomorrow, that this thing would continue on. And that's like the biggest gift to me, is just knowing that at least it's going now, and people are feeling it and understanding it, and it's true to them, and that's awesome. Because I would hate to see anything ever, this big get squashed, because I think that it's probably come up in the past and got squashed. It's just not as easy to squash it now with the internet and YouTube. But I think people like Robotham and these guys all tried to get this going, and were humiliated and called quacks and at that time period, he wasn't able to get the word to enough people for it to spread. He would go to a conference and talk, and all the people would make fun of him, and there would be a couple people that would maybe what he was saying, but they would just get in with the crowd and disappear. And I think that's what leads us to today. But now I'm 100% positive that this will continue on until at least what we have been told is proven, or we start working towards real science and real proofs and real facts and real evidence, because numbers on paper is not enough for me.
Yep.
So let's see here. Now, Curtis, any final words for you, buddy?
911 was an inside job.
No, it wasn't. That was what? It was terrorists.
Yeah.
Terrors.
Sandy Hook was an inside job.
Yes, all of it was. So
the flat Earth is the round Earth is an inside job.
It's an outside
actually
job.
Spherical.
It's actually the concave Earth that's an inside job.
There you go. He got the best of us, though.
I really enjoyed this today. It was great just listening to you guys. I'm no big science guy. It just makes sense. I really don't need that much evidence. Perspective-wise, everything leans towards a flat Earth. The round ball has not been proven, and if for them to get me to believe it, they got to put up some more info, and they got to stop with the CGI. Because I do Photoshop and stuff like that, so I can see right through their delusion.
Yeah, they need to come up with a better Photoshop, don't they?
Yeah, they got to do better. I guess the last thing, my final word would be to understand that despite the opposition, they're just people. Too often I hear on the internet they're Satanists, which they are. They're the Illuminati, which they are, but they're people. They bleed just like we do. They breathe air just like we do, and their only advantage is they make money whenever they want it. That's their only damn advantage. I refuse to give them the power of supernatural powers. They're just unconscious souls who get off spreading delusion throughout the world.
Yep. And ironically, they're also necessary, I think, in our world.
Right.
I think there's a lot to that too. Like the voodoo doll only works on people that believe in voodoo, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
So I refuse to believe in their voodoo dolls. That's just me. That's my approach to dealing with.
And you know what? If we add a world full of people like you, Curtis, I think we'd be in a different world, because the problem is too many people give them too many strengths, and if you give it to them, they're going to run with it. Right. And I refuse to do that as well. And I have no fear of any demon or any devil or any Satan coming anywhere near my life, because it doesn't exist to me. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just simply means I'm above all that and know that I've been given the power position in this situation, and I'm going to use it. So,
absolutely.
Yep. The dark side only has as much power as you give it.
Yep. And we also got to stop feeding this monster. We feed this monster. If we start starving it away or starving it out, it won't grow.
Yeah. Well, and it's also wearing very thin on people too. Like I said earlier, the fear mongering it's just not working anymore. At least nowhere near to the degree that it used to.
Right.
So that's a good thing, at least. A positive thing for us.
Right.
Yeah, it's not doing anything when you can go through a whole episode of Alex Jones and not shoot yourself in the head.
Got that right.
Everything's just fine.
Is it me, or does it seem like all truthers sort of started with that guy?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
David Icke, whoever,
Yeah, I listened to that guy for about 3 years, and then one day I said, he's crazy, and pulled away,
But he does have a lot of good points initially. You know, I mean, he's not entirely wrong about a lot of the stuff he says. It's just that, you know, a lot of people tend to believe, and there is some truth to this, that he has turned into more of a propagandist than a truth seeker.
Yeah.
But the reason we started listening to him in the first place, I mean, let's face it, he's right about a lot of stuff. He showed what was going on at Bohemian Grove, and you know, whether he, you know, decides to implicate the Jews or the, you know, the Jesuits or whoever, you know, whatever faction he might be a member of, you know, at least he's out there initially getting people to say, you know, there's really something screwed up in this world, and you know, then you just kind of springboard from there and go on to other researchers.
I think we could do a whole episode discussion on Alex Jones, because there's a lot to it, and you know, a lot of people stumbled on him early on into their path towards the truth because he really was put there where you couldn't miss him, and he does have a lot of truth to what he said. But you know, and I know we're getting towards the end here, but yeah, I could go on for days about Alex Jones.
Let's do that next week, because I don't have a guest. I don't think. No. Anybody had any guests that they've wanted to book or anything?
Possibly Rob Durham, but I need to talk to him about that yet. He's done some interesting work, but you know, we'll squeeze him in. We'll get there.
I've got an open invite out, but nothing solid yet. So.
All right. Well, maybe Monday we'll tentatively do an Alex Jones show, because I think there's. I know I wouldn't say necessarily started there, but I definitely listened to him for a good period of time, and it slowly went from a doom and gloom feeling to comedy to now I just pray that he cries, because I love the crying is just think about the children, think about the end of evil. It's just too much. It's really it's not that bad, okay? We don't need to go into bellowing cries. All right, and we said that Pete, did he ever come back? He's still muted. I still see the mute sign there. All right, Bob, any final words for the week?
Well, I would like to say that I thought our guests tonight were very good. Curtis, Michael, and Pete, thank you for joining us. I really believe that you guys had a lot to contribute to the conversation. It was very enjoyable tonight, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Morgile, words of advice or parting words?
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure hanging out with you guys as always. I look forward to this every week, and I'll look forward to hanging out with you guys again next week.
Awesome. Yeah, and I say the same thing. You three were awesome, and you know, Curtis, I commend you for your service and you know, allegiance to the people of this country more than to the name and to the flag, and actually being a human being and thinking like I believe we all deep down inside should feel and should think. So I appreciate that, and thanks for coming on, and some of the words were really helpful, and even put your name in for next week. Maybe you'll get back on, who knows. So again, give me 10 minutes after the show, guys, and you can head over to Jeranism if you want to try and be on next week. I think that's about it for me, so I appreciate everyone's support and coming over and finding the show where it was tonight. I don't know where it'll be next Monday, but you can find us at one place or the other. And if I'm gone, go to the Morgile's channel. Somewhere we'll be there next Monday, 6 to 8:30 Pacific time. So be nice to each other. Don't lie to each other. And open up your minds, because there's truth inside. Till next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace out.